On Tuesday, I think we are the 11th of February 2025. This is the Standing Committee on Education that will be receiving a briefing from the Western Cape Education Department on the admissions update and the status of school readiness and the 2024 National Senior Certificate results. And the committee is here, so I want to wish welcome to the committee, to Minister Mania and the Department of Education, led by Mr. Brent Walters, the head of department. I'm Leon van Wyk, the chair of the committee, and I now want to allow the members of the committee to introduce themselves, and then we'll hand over to Minister Mania so that his team can be introduced as well.
Good afternoon, Chair, Fallen Christians, afternoon, Minister and HOD and Department.
Good afternoon, Chair and Minister. I'm Donita Stevens and I'm a member of this committee.
Good afternoon, Thomas Walters, a member of this committee.
Member Stoffels.
Good afternoon, Chair, Member of Parliament.
I also just want to check online on the online platform if there are any members who can then introduce themselves.
Member.
Good afternoon, Chair. Member Aisha Kasim is also present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Minister Mania, good afternoon and welcome to you.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is David Mania. I'm the Minister of Education in the Western Cape. I am joined by my head of department, Brent Walters, who I'll ask to introduce his team.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Chair. My name is Brent Walters, the head of education. My delegation, 3 others can introduce themselves, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson, honourable members. My name is Alan Meyer. I'm the Deputy Director General, responsible for branch IDC.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. My name is Salih Abrams. I'm the Deputy Director General for Education Planning in the WCD.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, members. My name is Bertram Larison. I'm the Deputy Director General for Curriculum and Assessment Management.
Thank you very much. I just want to hand over to officials just to introduce themselves as well.
Wasima Hassan Musa, the Procedural Officer for the Standing Committee on Education. I'm accompanied by Mary Ann Burgess, she's around here somewhere, and Ben Daza, as well as Wasim Matthews. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Just want to check with Procedural Officer if there are any apologies that have been tabled that we are aware of. I think if we can just ask our guests at the back to introduce themselves, please. I think if we can start on the right-hand side and then we'll work across to the left. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Doreen Solomons, representing the Cape of Good Hope Methodist Church, the Education Forum. I'm heading that.
Good afternoon. I'm Ursula Hero. I'm accompanying Doreen as she's not so mobile at the moment.
Afternoon, Stephen Luttring from the Methodist Church of Southern Africa, Justice Desk.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marcia Manana. I'm an employee of the WCD who was affected by the budget cuts.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Claire Pierce from the Centre for Early Childhood Development.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Zena Haynes, also from the Centre for Early Childhood Development.
Thank you. I think the guest at the back, if you could just come forward to microphone and just introduce yourselves, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nombendo Lonkonlo. I'm an ex-teacher. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Patikazi Mnotoza from Kukuletu in the Education Crisis Committee. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can then move to the left.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roscoe Jacobs. I am the liaison officer in the office of the Leader of the Opposition, Honorable Khalid Said.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bongani Yamba, the Provincial Chairperson of Disabled People South Africa. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nuria. Yeah, and I'm here to debate on the issue of cutting the budget of the teachers.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Shaman Kibidu, founder of Grace Community Development from the area of Delft. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a PhD student from UCT and my name is Tasneem Francis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ntutuzelo Nene from Eyewitness News.
Good afternoon, Barry Firth from the Faculty of Education at CPU team.
Thank you. I see Member Syed. If you could just introduce yourself, please.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Khalid Sayed, member of the committee. Thank you.
I'm not sure if Member Boyson, I know he's online. I know he's had problems with his microphone earlier today. I don't know if you are able to introduce yourself. It doesn't look like Member Boyson is able to do that, but he is online there. Thank you very much. I also see the Chief Whip, Member Bosman, is on the platform as well.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and colleagues. Gillian Postman, a member of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament.
Thank you very much. Right, I think we can get down to business then, and we are meeting today to receive a briefing by the Western Cape Education Department, going to be dealing with admissions, the status of school readiness, and the National Senior Certificate matric results. And I know there are a number of presentations to be provided to us. I'm going to ask members to make notes as we go along, and then that we can take questions after the presentations have been done. Thank you. You can go ahead, Minister.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good afternoon to honourable members and to members of the public. It obviously gives us great pleasure to have an opportunity to brief the committee both on the NSC results and on admissions 2025. Let me begin by saying, of course, that we are very proud of the matric class of 2024. Who achieved the highest pass rate ever at, I recall correctly, 86.6%. and we look forward to sharing with you in much more detail our analysis of the matric results. We have also, Chairperson, made very significant progress on admissions, placing about 99% of our grade 1s and 8s. I think it's also very important for the committee to understand that despite the very stringent budget cuts which have been imposed on our department, we have made available up to 477 additional growth posts for enrollment pressure, particularly at our new schools and our schools who are under significant enrollment pressure. We have also, Chairperson, been working extremely hard to mobilize alternative sources of finance to support the department, and we are very proud of the fact that we are the first department in this provincial government to be awarded BFI funding, which, as you know, in the amount of about 2.5 billion rand over the medium term. We are, Chairperson, under significant pressure, and our principal challenge at this stage of the cycle, of course, is to deal with our extremely late applications, which we are working hard to resolve. I do understand that for some parents, this is a difficult time, and I do want to advise parents who may be present here that our admissions team is present outside and are on standby to assist any parents who may have admissions queries so that we can work towards resolving those queries as soon as possible. With that, Chair, I would like to hand over then through you to our head of department and our team to take you through the presentation, and we then certainly look forward to responding to questions from members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and Minister. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So, Chairperson, we've gonna have two presenters today. Mr. Meyer, DDG Meyer, he will be doing the presentation on admissions, school readiness, learner transport, holiday security, which are the topics that you had asked us to actually comment on. And then Mr. Lauriston will be looking at the analysis of the National Senior Certificate exam. As the Minister indicated, it was the best result ever in the history of the WCED. And Mr. Lauriston will be taking you through that, let me just say blow by blow, to look at potentially what are the issues, if there are any issues inside that area. So, as is normal at this time of the year, we get to a point where we have to place learners. We've been doing that since last year already. I think the committee will know we have an application system. The dates for that start in February already, and they go through the year. We popularize those dates through many media platforms, our own media platforms, but also through the relationships with our trade unions, our SGB associations, and other entities inside education to be able to make sure that people have actually applied on time. What we have at this point is that, as Mr. Meyer will indicate, that essentially we still have learners coming late, still applying now, as we speak, to be able to enter the system. We will give you, as of 11 February 2025, on the grade 1 and 8, what our placement situation is. At this point, having placed in grade 1 and 8 more than 99% of the learners.
Displayed on the screen so that we can see.
Sorry, ma'am, let me show you. These are just the opening remarks. The presentation will be reflected. I'm not doing the presentation. I'm just setting the context. So maybe to indicate that I was saying that for grade 1 and 8, which are our 2 entry points into our system, we have placed more than 99% of the learners. I think the challenges, as we will see, come with the fact that parents want specific places for children, and obviously we don't have specific places, those specific places there. So some areas are oversubscribed. However, we are in a good position if we compare it over the last, say, 5 to 10 years in terms of getting learners placed. Obviously, we can't account for how many learners may still arrive because there are still people that come into our system every day. We do have an electronic system, which means people can actually apply from anywhere in South Africa, indeed anywhere in the world, to come to school inside the Western Cape. So with those few words, Chairperson, as by way of introduction, I would like to hand over to Mr. Meyer. He will take us through the first presentation. Mr. Meyer, thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, members, and the public that is present. Are you flighting the slide?
I think if you can flight from your side, Mr. Meyer.
Yeah, can you flight that?
Second up the flight. Yeah.
Teams meeting.
Excellent. We're just waiting for the flighting to take place.
Me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lauriston, for your assistance. Apologies for that, Chair. We were not informed that we had to. Okay, but it's fine. Thank you very much. So I will do the presentation.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Walters can perhaps just turn off your mic there as well. Oh, we don't get.
Thanks.
Double sound. Okay.
You can go to the first slide, Mr. Lauriston. One more. There we go. Thank you, colleagues. What we see on the slide is the number of learners in grade 1 and grade 8 whose placement is still in progress. So these are learners who have applied, some of them on time, some of them late. Late in that context there is from March, the end of March, through until December 2024. And extremely late is learners who have parents who applied in January of this year up until the present. So in terms of on-time applications for grade 1, there are 13 learners who are still unplaced. Those are largely learners whose parents are insistent on a particular school, and we have offered other schools as opportunities for those learners, and parents have declined that, and hence those learners are still staying on the list. There are also learners who have applied late in last year that are still requiring placement, and then those that arrived in January and early February of this year, 269 of them, with a total unplaced at grade 1 of 319. Now that 319 in the context of all the applications that we have received in the province is 0.9%. In other words, at grade 1, we have 0.9% of learners unplaced. In grade 8, there are 417 learners that are unplaced who had applied on time, 271 who were late, and 579 who had applied in this year. There's a total unplaced of 1,267, and which that represents 1.2% of all the applications for grade 8 in the province. So that gives us a total of 1,586 learners unplaced at grade 1 and grade 8 currently in the Western Cape. Those 1,586 learners are being placed on a daily basis. The process still continues to place those particular learners. But I also just want to add that in one of our districts since Friday last week, we had 396 walk-in applications. These are very late applications. And these are parents who brought learners to the district office from Friday last week up until yesterday. 396 new learners coming into the province. Now, these are learners coming into the province for the first time, not only from neighboring provinces, but also from foreign countries as well. So we're seeing a number of learners coming from within Africa, coming in and requesting placement within our schools. Where a child is currently in a school in the Western Cape and requesting a move to another school in close proximity, but is a school of choice, that kind of request is not being approved as the child is already placed and the child is within a school. So colleagues, if we take the total number of unplaced learners in the province of 1586, it represents 1% of the total applications that we have received in the province. I just give you a sense of the total applications that we have received in the province to date. In grade 1, there were 33,777 applications on the SAMI system. Now, I must just explain that is not the full cohort of grade 1 learners. The full cohort of grade 1 learners is also the learners who have progressed from grade R into grade 1. In other words, those parents do not apply. The child moves from grade R to grade 1, and they are not captured on the SAMI system per se as a new application because they're already existing within the system. At grade 8, we had 99,609 applications. Of that 99,609 applications in grade 8, 98,342 has already been placed. It's only the 1,267 that still remains at grade 8 level. And that 1,267 represents 1% of that total number of applications at grade 8. Thank you. Next slide, please. So if we look at it in a little bit more detail for the placement of learners in grades 1 and 8, if we go to the next slide, Mr. Lauriston. In grade 1, this is a breakdown per district. And what is immediately noticeable from this particular picture is that the metro districts have a higher placement request. And so if you take Metro Central, which is very low, it's at 11. But if you take Metro East, it's 116 learners still to be placed. Metro North, 42, and Metro South, 50. That's the bulk. And you'll notice it at grade 7 as well, that's the bulk of learners that are still in process of being placed. In the rural districts, the numbers are much lower. If you take West Coast, for example, there are 39 learners. And that 39 learners are largely in certain areas or pockets within the West Coast. So that is largely in our Circuit 3. Our Circuit 3 in the West Coast is the Vredenburg, Saldanha Bay area. And so there's a lot of influx of people into that area, hence a higher number in that specific circuit requesting placement for learners in the Saldanha Bay, Vredenburg, Langebaan area. So their number is 36. In the Overberg district, there are only 6 grade 1s that still need to be placed. And of course, that will be attended to by the district very easily or very quickly. You'll also notice there, for example, these are very late applications that came in 2025. And those are the only 6 that need to be placed. If you look at Cape Winelands and Eden and Central Karoo at the top, Cape Winelands has 28 learners still to be placed, but also learners, as well as the 27 in the Eden district, arrived in this year requesting placement within the schools. And if you look at the Metro Central as well, you see that the learners that came in January and February of this year, the 10 of them is the majority of the 11, for example, that still needs to be placed. And also in all the other metro districts as well, you'll see it's the learners who arrived in this year that largely still requires the placement in the schools. But as I indicated earlier, we are assured by our district staff and by our school principals in the districts of the primary schools that we will accommodate that 319 learners, and they all will be placed as speedily as possible. In the grade 8, the next slide, Mr. Lauriston. The picture is fairly similar. It is the metro districts of Central, 167, 412 in Metro East, 248 in Metro North, and 306 in Metro South. Again, 88.6% of the unplaced learners in the grade 8 are the learners in the metro districts. Again, the rural districts, the numbers are much lower. In your Overberg district, there are 24. West Coast, there are 53. In Eden and Central Karoo, there are 17. And in the Cape Winelands district, there are 40. But again, if you look at the rural districts, it is the very late applications that are still being placed into a school for this year. As well as even in the metro districts. If you look at Metro East, they received 146 applications in 2025. And these are just the unplaced of those that came in. So the number that applied from January up until now is much higher. But already 146 of them is still left to be placed. And the 85 in Metro South that arrived late this year, in Metro North, they will also be placed. And what we found in Metro South is quite different in that we had placed all the learners in grade 8 in Metro South. And come the start of this year, 169 popped up at the district offices and at our pop-up centers requesting placement at the schools in the Metro South district. So again, the bulk of the learners are in the metro districts, and the metro districts as well as the rural districts have affirmed that they will place these learners at the schools in the districts. It is not necessarily at the school where the parent has a choice, but it is at the school where we have place for the learner, and we will make that space available to the parent in order for the child to get into a school. I want to add, Chairperson, that for every learner that has visited our district offices, that we have offered the learner a pack to start working from. So every grade 8 learner was given a pack with exercises in mathematics, in languages that they could work through in preparation for when they get into class. So learner packs have been made available in the districts to schools, and where parents have arrived at school, they were handed to parents. Where parents arrived at the district office, they were handed to parents as well, for learners to be able to start the academic year with some exercises. At the Metro East district, where I was yesterday, parent came, I asked her, did you receive a pack? She said, no, sir, I've received my pack for my child, but I'm here just to follow up on the placement. But my child, I want to assure you, my child is at home busy working on the pack. So that was evidence for me that the child had received the pack and that the parent was actually monitoring that the child was continuing with the academic program. I want to also say that we've gone out in this year, unprecedented. We went out in this year and opened up pop-up centers in various areas. We had it over 4 Saturdays where we had a pop-up center. We had staff there, and parents could come and register their child for a place in the school. Now, a large number of the parents who arrived at those pop-up centers already had applied, but wanted to get an update of where they are, where their child is in terms of placement. And quite a number of the parents who arrived at the centers, at the pop-up centers, were actually informed, but your child has already been placed. It's a matter of you taking the child to the school, registering, and getting the books, etc. We found the pop-up centers to be very useful, not only from our perspective in terms of understanding what the need is outside, but also for parents to have the comfort to get an immediate answer from the staff working with admissions as to where in the process their child is currently of being placed. And so our staff worked tirelessly, and unfortunately on one of the Saturdays we had to close a center because of local gang activity. We had to close the center because our staff felt threatened by the illegal activities that were going on around in that parking area of that particular mall, and we rather removed our staff out of that particular situation. But the pop-up centers, which we did last year as well, provided parents with an opportunity to go to a place with the necessary documents of the child. The staff uploaded that information, and we were then able to process the application of that particular learner and have them on the system, and then try and find a space for that child fairly quickly. I want to add as well, Chairperson, that in an admissions program, we have to wait until the 10th day, the 10th school day of the year. Now, for those who are familiar with the educational environment, will understand that at the 10th day of the year, we take a snap survey of the numbers of learners within a particular school. And so the principal has to engage with CMIS to put in the number of boys and the number of girls in class grade 1A, grade A2, grade A3, etc. And that then verifies that those learners are at the school and they're in class. What we've also done is we've sent our teams in each of our districts to visit schools as well, to do physical head counts of learners at school. And so we went to school A, and we actually had a staff component at the school of about 10 to 15 officials who then go to different classes and count the actual number of learners in a class according to the register. But now an important process happens after the 10th day. Because at the end of the 10th day, if a learner's not been in school from the first day up until the 10th day, the principal then has the authority to remove the learner from the register of that school. Okay? And when a learner is removed from the register of a school on the 10th day, it then allows the school now an opportunity to place a learner on the waiting list in that particular place of where a learner has not returned to school. And so that was last week. So the week before last was the 10th day, and we have now in the process of filling those spaces where learners have been taken off the register of schools, and hence we'll see the numbers declining of the learners being placed at schools at grades 1 and grade 8. So what is the current state and the way forward, Mr. Lauriston? In our Metro North District, South as well as East, we face particular challenges in respect of the lack of available land for us to build classrooms. So we got an offer from our infrastructure component to say we can accommodate the build of 63 mobiles. And when we offered it to the districts to say, here is an opportunity to get an additional mobile for you to be able to accommodate learners, schools replied to say, but we have no more space on our premises to actually put down the mobile. And so a number of schools who were offered a mobile couldn't take the mobile because there was no physical space for the school to actually put the mobile down. And we took quite a bit of time, and there were about 13 that we struggled for quite a bit of time to actually find a place of where we could put down those mobiles for the school. I want to just also add, schools also need a play field for learners, you know, and if we look at some of our schools already, our build is right up to almost the sideline of the field. And so placing a mobile could restrict the sporting activity or program of the school if we are to put a mobile on the school field, for example, on the edge of the field. It's going to make the soccer field or the rugby field or the netball field smaller, and our learners are unable to exercise their possibility of playing and engaging in a sporting activity at school. So it's the physical space around our schools. And if you visit schools in our Metro North District in particular, you will have noticed that there's a number of our schools that are literally expanded to the maximum already. Metro North was part of the first round of the rapid build exercise, received a number of classrooms at a range of different schools. And those learners were placed in those schools, but at this point in time, there's no further possibility of expanding on the number of rooms available at a particular school. The 477 additional posts that our minister has made available is in the process of being finalized by the districts, and then we will distribute it. These 477 posts are like little pieces of gold at the moment, because we want to give it to schools who have increased the numbers of their learners at their school. That's the first priority. So if a school has taken in 40 more learners than what they had last year, they will be looked at for an additional post from that 477 posts that have been made available. And that we will distribute to the schools over the next week or two. I know the districts are sending in their requests. We've got 4 responses from 4 of the districts already. And the demand is going to be for that 477 posts. And as soon as those demands are all in, we'll process them. We'll issue a new establishment letter to schools to say, because your role has increased by, let's say, 55 learners, you have been given and granted an additional growth post at your school to accommodate for the additional growth in learner numbers at your school. Late applications have all been captured. So when people went to the pop-up centers, they dropped a hard copy of an application form. We employed 16 additional staff members, students who normally capture during the examination period. We called them back and said they must come and capture the hard copy application forms. All of those forms have now been captured. Those learners are on the system. There are a small number of those forms where parents have not completed the cell phone number or the address correctly, and we're having some challenges in contacting some parents. We're sending them the email to the email that we have on the system that they've captured, but we're waiting, and there's a small number of those parents that we still need to capture. Schools are now withdrawing learners, as I indicated earlier, that have not arrived following the 10th school day, which has provided opportunities, as I've explained earlier, for further placement of learners within schools. So just again, I spoke to a principal this morning at a school called Gateway in the Lansdowne, Grassy Park, Philippi area, where we placed learners, and the now roll at the school is down. So I asked the principal, Ms. Nzuza, what are you going to do? She said, Mr. Mayor, we are prepared to take in additional learners at the school, more than what we planned for, because we've got the space, because infrastructure had added classes to that school, because they now for the first time have grade 10s at the school, and so we can have more learners to be placed there. That provides an opportunity for the district to place learners at that school, for example. But in other schools where there's numbers that have decreased, and I can mention a school in the Strand area where when we checked on the 10th day, a large number of learners had not arrived at school. And when the principal in the school called the parents to say, but you applied for a place for your child at this school, your child is not here, where is your child? The parents said, no, the child is not here in the province. Some of the parents said the child is in the province, but we took him to another school without informing the school where the learner was placed. We also have parents that are uncontactable. The cell phone number that they gave, the email address that they gave, we've sent emails, we've made telephone calls, we've captured all of that information, when we called, who called, we're putting that on the file as well, and we're just unable to contact some parents as well. So I'd like to ask, if you are aware of a parent who has applied late or applied to a school and taken the child and moved them elsewhere, to please have the patience with our system to go to the school where the child was placed to say, thank you very much for the place. We've placed our child elsewhere. And so it's a very important one. I'd like you to assist us in that regard, please. So in terms of the delivery progress, the next slide, Mr. Lauriston, on new schools and classrooms, we've delivered 7 new schools, were delivered in January of 2025. Then we are delivering another 3 by March of this year. For example, Kilimanjaro in the Metro South area. I think it's in Tafelsig area, if I'm correct. There's Blueberry Hill in the West Bank area, a new school. And then also in the Delft area, the Leiden Junior School will also be opening, and that will be additional capacity that's being generated within the system. At the end of the year, there are other schools that will come online. For example, Blue Ridge High School will come online in January of 2026. Blue Ridge Primary is already in the process of being filled, and full capacity will be as of January of 2026 as well. But if there are further questions on that, you're most welcome to ask. So in total, 283 of the 293 new classrooms have been delivered in January in 2025. Those classrooms that have been provided is there to accommodate learners at schools that have been placed in those classes by the district staff, and those learners are therefore in new rooms at the school. The stationery, the desks, the chairs, all of that is in the process of being finalized, and that should all be resolved soon. We are also looking at 3 new schools, as I've indicated, in March of this year. At the end of March, they will come online as of 1 April. There's 127 new additional classrooms that will also be built by March 2025. So besides the new schools, there's also additional classrooms. And then a further 51 additional mobile classrooms that's also been approved. And those mobiles will also come into effect to provide additional place. And then there's the ones I've mentioned earlier, the 12, where we just have offered it to a district and said, here is the possibility. Use these mobiles on a site within your district. District director, this principal of the school, the governing body chairperson of the school came back to say, we don't have the physical space on our premises to expand. And so that 12, we are still in the process of confirming as well. Thank you, Chair. I will now move over to the status of school readiness, questions that have been asked. If you can move to the next slide, please, Mr. Lauriston. So the following aspects will be covered: the status of online and manual applications of learners and the challenges pertaining to these applications, the transport system in place for learners, the state of vandalisms at schools that occurred during the December 2024 school vacation, and then also textbook, stationery and furniture that is being delivered and in the process and being finalized of that is being delivered to school. So in terms of the status of online and manual applications, the next slide. The WCD has successfully processed 257,565 with 2,247,598. 96% of grade R to grade 12 applications are placed and resolved. Those learners are in class, they are busy learning, and there's a 1%, as we indicated earlier, of grade 1 and grade 8 that is still in the process of being placed. The WCD has processed all hard copy applications, as I've indicated earlier. We got in additional staff to help with the capture of the hard copy applications we received, except for 53, where certain details provided needed to be verified so that it could be captured. Our system is very clear. You must have the contact details of a parent, a primary parent, that we have to have the email address, the telephone number, the address of that parent. And if any of that information is not captured, we cannot process that application on our system. Okay? The ID number of the learner. We've made the systems easier. If the parent enters the child's CMIS number, it's now applying for grade 8, the parent enters the child's CMIS number, it immediately, the system pulls up all the information of the child, and the parent now merely says, I'd like my child to go to Bellville South High School, Castles Place High School, Bellville RTS, or to Dekalen. The parent merely chooses the school that the parent would like the child to go to, chooses the schools, and the application is done. The parent will then get a message to say, you need to take the bulk of the learner's application forms, the documents that must be taken to the school. The school will request that, and the parent has an opportunity to take it there to that school to be verified. And the school admissions committee then sits and makes a decision on who's accepted at the school or not. The online system performed very well. Since it has been taken away from hosting on a machine within SITA in Mowbray, it's now a cloud solution, which allows for many more people to be on the system at the same time. That has been increased. And because of that, we've only had 80 minutes of downtime. And that was since the system opened in the 11th of March, 2024. It was only down for 80 minutes, right? And that 80 minutes, the bulk of it happened recently when we moved learners from SAMI into CMIS. When that process happened, there were 3 other processes happening in the department at the same time. Schools were uploading their school self-assessment, the school's annual performance review. All of that other documentation were being uploaded onto the same solution, and that slowed the system down. And then because there was so much traffic on it, the system switched itself off and then it took a little while for it to come back on. And that is largely the 80 minutes that the system was down. In other words, the system was available to parents to capture during that period since 11 March, the application for their child. The 2026 admissions process opens on the 11th of March and will go through until the 15th of April. Again, a month. Parents will have an opportunity to apply for a place for their child for 2026. So we're not out of the woods yet, and then we're back into the woods. And just to say, you know, that admissions placement of learners is a year-long process. Because as we're placing, as we're refining our systems, as we, you know, creating more spaces in classes, in schools within the province, so more learners are returning. But we've also seen some not such good pictures, Chairperson, where we're having a meeting with the Department of Social Development, for example, to have a discussion about why suddenly there's also a large numbers of learners coming into the school and saying, I want a place. The same learner was at the same school the previous year, but was there for a month and then disappeared for the rest of the year. The school followed up with the parents. Where is the child? Child never arrived back at the school. But then we found out something interesting, that the child has to be at school. The parent needs a letter to say that the child is registered at the school, and the parent is able to apply for a grant. And so we've picked up on some of those cases. And so in one of our districts, we're having a meeting soon with the Department of Social Development to see, you know, what other monitoring measures we can put in place to ensure that the child stays for the year. We want them at the school for the year, and not just to come and get the letter to say the child is registered at the school and an application can then be made for the social grant. And so we're just looking at tightening up on some of those opportunities where parents are not really playing their part in merely doing some things just so that the child is in a school, but not actually ensuring that the child stays there for the full year. Chairperson, I will move to the learner transport scheme, the LTS service within the department. A budget of more than 500 million, Chairperson, in a year is spent on learner transport. And so the learner transport policy applies to learners in public ordinary schools, in rural areas of the Western Cape, living 5 kilometers or further from the nearest appropriate school, and where no public transport is available. Rural areas in the Western Cape living 5 kilometers and more from the nearest appropriate school, and where no public school transport is available near that particular community. Also included in there is something around learners needing to be transported because of language of learning and teaching as well. So some learners are transported because of language requirements as well. The learner has a particular need for English tuition, but lives in a community where there's only Afrikaans. And therefore, you know, learners have to then be transported from other areas outside of Malmesbury, for example, to Ilingaletu, because that is the school that offers English and isiXhosa home language as the first additional language, or sorry, as a home language, and English as a first additional language, and the learner is then provided with a better opportunity. The head of department may, under exceptional circumstances, authorize the provision of a learner transport scheme where he or she deems fit, subject to the merits of each individual case. It's not a blanket approval that can be done for a batch of applications that come through. Each one has to be done individually. And so to explain the system that we have within our department, a school makes an application to transport learners, let's say, for example, from Genadendal, or let's say from outside of Genadendal, let's say Elgin to Genadendal High School. The school makes an application. We have 60 learners coming from Elgin requiring tuition at a school in Genadendal, for example. That school submits the application to the district officials. The circuit manager will assess that particular route, make a decision that, yes, it is a valid request to transport the learners because the learners are there. There are no other learners near, there's no other school near where the learners live that can accommodate them for isiXhosa home language and English first additional language, so that we have to transport the learners. So there's an approval from the district circuit manager, the district director signs it, it comes through to head office. In the head office process, Mrs. van Ster and Mrs. McGlenn Nattendorf are the chairpersons and vice chairpersons of the bus committee in the school. That bus committee sits and adjudicates on the application. Is it a valid application for these learners in terms of distance? Do we have an existing route that we can expand to accommodate these learners? Is it a new route that we have to implement? Because if it's a new route that we have to implement, there's a supply chain process that would need to be kicking in as well. If there's emergency procurement that we need to do to get the learners to school in the interim while we get a service provider to provide the bus route and all of those kind of dynamics. They make a recommendation and that then comes through the system to approve or to not approve that request of that school. The school is informed, they inform the parents, and the learners are on the bus and they can travel to the school in the LTS system. Next slide, Mr. Lauriston. So what are our current statistics related to learner transport? In Metro East, we've got 32 schools who are providing learner transport. And here, for example, we have the area like Eerste River, where we all know there's a limited number of schools and capacity. And we've had to, I'm thinking of the Afrikaans word, but I can't get English. Afrikaans word is noodgedwonge. We were forced to transport learners within the metro to a school where they could then be accommodated. So, for example, learners were transported out of the Eerste River area into the Khayelitsha area at Balumko, for example, or Bonga Primary, for example, for learners to be accommodated in grade 8. Right? That was created at that particular school. The number of learners in that district is 5,375. In Metro South, there are only 6 bus routes, 279 learners involved. Metro North, 33, 5,038 learners, for example, there. Even though it's a metro district, remember Atlantis is part of Metro North. Santa is also part of Metro North, which is a rural area, technically, but it forms part of the Metro North district, and so learners are transported there. In the West Coast, there are 91 schools that benefit from the learner transport. 14,591 learners are transported on a daily basis. Okay. In the Overberg, there are 60 schools that benefit from it. And remember, in the Overberg, we've only got 85 schools, and 60 of those schools make use of learner transport. And so there we have 9,105 learners being transported. And now our 2 bigger ones is your Cape Winelands, where we're transporting 22,000 learners. It's a massive transport operation in the Cape Winelands district. Because literally, if you look at Cape Winelands geographically, you've got Ceres, Koue Bokkeveld on the one side. You've got Gouda on the other side. Now on this side here. Then you've got up to the Dwins along the N1. Then you come over and you go to, Montague and those areas there as well, coming through to Robertson and into Worcester as well. It's a very big geographic area. And so we found, for example, that people who are working on the farms as seasonal workers come with their families, and we then need to move learners from a particular area into a school in another area because of the requirement around LALT. They qualify in terms of distance. There's no school in the immediate vicinity that accommodates the LALT, and we had to transport those learners, for example, to school. So there's about 22,000 learners there. In the Eden and Central Karoo district, the same matter. 112 of their schools are serviced by learner transport routes, and that's about 11,000 learners. So we have about 68,000 learners on a daily basis that is being transported throughout the province at over 500 schools, which is about 1/3 of our schools the way we are transporting learners at a budget of 598 million per year. Now, it's not a small number. Neither is it a number we can cut. Because if we cut the number of learner transport, the amount of learner transport, and say we're going to take the money and use it elsewhere, we are definitely going to impact negatively on children who rely on this transport on a daily basis to get to a school. And so it's an area where we have decided we're not going to cut the budget because it has very significant implications for learners not being able to reach school, and hence that budget is kept intact on that side. The learner transport procedures and the bus committee. So in terms of our standard operating procedure, Mr. Lawson, next slide. In addition to the LTS policy, the WCD has a standard operating procedures as well for learner transport schemes, which is currently being updated. The SOP, for example, defines and expands on the requirements of the WCD LTS policy. It also serves to ensure that all stakeholders, head office, districts and schools are aware of their responsibilities related to the management and monitoring of LTS within the province. So a school principal has to sign off that Daniel's Transport delivered 56 learners to our school today. Somebody actually has to account for that. And the next in the afternoon, when the learners get back on the bus, somebody has to account for the number of learners. Because remember, the bus company is paid for the number of learners who are on the bus, not those that are not on the bus. They are paid for the learners that are on the bus only for the transport of those learners to the school. And so the school has a responsibility in terms of that. But more importantly, the principal has a responsibility to ensure that the bus is roadworthy, has been checked on a regular basis, has the necessary safety equipment on the bus to ensure the safety of learners as well. We have also agreed with the Department of Mobility to start a program because we recently delivered 13 new buses to our special schools, buses that have been so warmly received by those schools, because now learners with special needs are able to travel in adapted transport to get to school. And so we had the handover of those buses recently, and in the conversation with the Minister of Mobility, the MEC for Mobility, there's an agreement that their traffic officials, remember they're responsible for the Provincial Traffic Service, to provide refresher to our drivers as well in checking that the buses are roadworthy, etc. Also a service to the schools to say what to look for to ensure that the buses are safe enough for the transport of learners. And one doesn't like to speak about having a clean record, remember Christians, about something, because then the unthinkable happens. So I just want to say that we are monitoring our learner transport very carefully. We ensure that our officials are out on the various routes on a regular basis to check on the roadworthy of buses to ensure that the learners are transported safely from their homes to the school. The bus committee members are appointed by the head of education and consist of managers from various directorates, which includes the districts, Mrs. van Ster, physical resources, that is Mrs. McGlenatendorf, management accounting, and institutional management and governance is part of the committee. The committee considers all the applications, as I've indicated earlier, and ensure that they are aligned to the LTS policy and the strategic objectives of the department. They make a recommendation to the accounting officer or the delegated official based on the information that was submitted by the school. Now, many times, Chairperson, a community will come and say, but our kids are not being transported. And when we go back to the department to go and check, then a valid application was not received from the school. And upon inquiring from the principal said, but nobody spoke to them about having a learner transport route, for example. So sometimes, people, make certain statements, but unfortunately, there's no document tracking process that we've got within our system that actually provides the evidence to say, well, there is a valid application. We will consider it and make a recommendation whether we accept and approve the route or not. But so I just wanted to make that point as well. On the next slide, Mr. Lauriston, the application process, as I've said, the school does this via CMIS. Our management system at our schools. The principal goes on, he says that all these learners, and they tick them off on the register of the school, qualify to be transported. They live in, let's say, in Napier, and they must be, or let's say they live in Grabouw, and they must be transported to a school in Botrevier, right? All those learners who live in Botrevier and is attending, let's say, Umiezo Wame Apile in Grabouw, the principal of the school in Grabouw must capture that application to say, This list of learners are the ones coming from Botterfield to the school. Okay. That application is done on CMIS. There's hard copy documentation they will also have to provide. For example, in an instance where learners are walking along a road where there's no pavement, there's no street lighting, it's a gravel road, there are trucks driving up and down during the harvest season, it's a risk for children. That kind of information the school also provides with photos to say, look here, if during winter this river floods, children cannot cross it. They provide us with the pictorial evidence, and we then add that to the application, and the bus committee sits and make a decision on whether it is a valid application or not. The application is firstly verified by our Directorate Institutional Resource Support at head office. The verified LTS application is presented for consideration and recommendation by the bus committee. It's placed en route to the LTS program manager or the head of department for consideration and approval. Upon approval, the district and the school are informed, as I indicated earlier, of the outcome, and the Director of Procurement Management is thereafter requested to procure a contract for a new route or to vary an existing contract. So, for example, we've got a contract to transport learners from Besitzdrift in the Overberg to Verliesdorp, as an example. There is an existing bus route, but the bus route says it's catering for 60 learners. But there are 40 more children now from Verliesdorp going to Besitzdrift. Therefore, we make an application for that 40. The bus committee approves it. Supply chain then expands that contract from 60 to 100 to accommodate the 40 learners, and the bus company then continues to transport those learners. And that is what the supply chain process is that is followed there. It's advertised, companies can all apply, and the normal rules around that is applied. Upon awarding of the contract, the school principal and the successful learner transport contractor meet to discuss the relevant times. Now, in some cases, principals tell me, no, the bus company is fetching the learners at 3 o'clock. I'm saying, where's your sport program? If your school is finishing at 2:30, are your learners only playing sport for a half an hour before the buses have to leave? And I say to principals, the buses do not dictate the pickup time of learners at the end of the day. The buses are there to provide a service at the time the principal, the governing body of the school, has decided the learners must be engaged in a sporting program. And so on a particular day, let's say it's a Tuesday and a Thursday, the learners are engaged in sport from 2:30 until 3:30. There's an hour compulsory sport program. The buses can collect them at 3:30 to 4 o'clock. And that is an arrangement between the principal and the bus company. So where a governing body or a principal says, no, but we got no control. No, the control is with the principal, governing body supporting him or her, and the bus company. And that's an agreement that must be agreed on. And then we can have those learners playing sport and still being transported by the buses. So then lastly, learners are transported daily in line with the contract conditions and the LTS SOP requirements. In most of the cases in the rural districts, the buses actually stay at the school for the whole day. Now remember, there's bus routes that we advertise, we publish, companies tender for it. There's a bid adjudication committee, bid whatever committees that sit and make decisions about who is allocated the route, and it's awarded to a company. There's also schools who say to us, we would like to transport the learners. We have the capability, financial management at our school to be able to manage a learner transport route. We call that route a devolved route. Okay, so a devolved route is where a school governing body and management team of the school says, we're going to run this learner transport route. They apply to us to run the route. They say to us, we're going to charge you 2 cents per kilometer per child for the transporting on the route. We have a look at what the other schools in that area is paying. And if let's say the schools in that area is paying 120 cents per kilometer per day per child, we'll say to the school, thank you very much for your application, but your pricing is out in terms of what we can get in the marketplace. The principal says, no, we've thought about it again. We've come back. We agree we can do it for 120. to transport the child. We then approve the learner transport route. We say to the school, you're going to transport X number of learners, and you have to provide a regular service for these learners. And the schools, in some cases, goes and buys a bus because the bank says to them, you've got proof of a contract. You are going to get the money from the department. You have to provide the service, and the school is able to buy a bus. In some of our cases, it's managed very well. And the advantage of it is that the school then gets a 10% of the cost of the contract for the administration of that route. But what schools are able to do with that 10% is quite phenomenal. They're able to take their learners on excursions for a much reduced cost to parents because they've covered for that cost within the 10% that they get. And so they subsidize the cost to learners, and therefore some of those learners get to see other parts of the countries which they otherwise would not have been able to see. So that's an example of where it works well. There's also the other side, which I'm sure many of you are aware of where schools do not necessarily do that. But we've dealt with those cases very, very seriously to the extent where principals were put on the firing line for not utilizing those services of those contracts correctly. In terms of the monitoring of our LTS operations, we work very closely with the City of Cape Town, within the metro, for example, where we have people dropping off learners at school. And one morning I was called, there was an accident on the Val Drive. And when we got there, one of our learners was trapped in the vehicle. But when it was counted, there were way more than 22 learners that were within that particular minibus, bringing the learners to school. And so we find overloading is a big challenge of these providers of service. It's nothing to do with us. This is an agreement between a parent and a taxi owner who says to the parent, I will fetch your child at 6 o'clock and I will drop your child at 3:30 every afternoon. Your child will get to school and I'll fetch them and bring them home. Parent says, thank you very much. I'll pay you, it's 100 Rand a week for my child to use that service. Okay? But now they say that to 20 other parents. And they don't have two vehicles. They have one vehicle where they load all of those children in. And so it's a big concern for these taxis that providing the service. And so the city has had a number of pop-up checking around certain schools, and where they are found to be overloading or the vehicle is not completely fully registered. There's no seat belts for the children, for example, to wear. The driver is unlicensed, as what we found in that case on the Val Road, etc. And that, for example, is how with the city we are able to combat that, and of course with other law enforcement agencies as well. So we periodically do visual checks of the buses. We monitor compliance in respect of the LTS contract. Is it the bus that the contractor said they're going to provide for that route? Is it actually that bus that is being used? Because, when they apply for the contract, they've got beautiful pictures of beautiful buses. But when the service is delivered, it's another bus. So we have to bring them back to what was advertised and what they replied within their documents to say, this is the bus we're providing. This is the capability of the bus. This is how many is seated in the bus. And we look at that type of compliance. The district also does checks. Our LTS officials in the district drive out in the morning to go and stand with children at the pickup point and see what time the bus arrives. We check whether the driver is checking who is getting onto the bus, greeting the children at least, ensuring that they are seated before he pulls away. Not while children are still walking to the seat, pulling off, and children falling around in the bus. From head office side, we deliver the policy as well as the LTS SOP, and we maintain a centralized vehicle database as well. So when there's an accident that happens on the road anywhere, we can tell you, by which we've got the registration number, we can tell you who the owner of the bus is because we've got that information and we're able to activate fairly quickly to get support to where that particular accident has happened. Chairperson, I go to the status on vandalism at our schools during the December holidays. So if we look at the graph, the blue is the 2023-2024 incidents. The orange is the 2024-2025. So you'll notice that the major cases it was 1-1, right? 23, 24. But when we go to the minor incidents, it shifted from 25 in 2023-24 to 40 in 24-25. So there was quite a dramatic increase. In terms of negligible events, we had 6 of them in the last financial year compared to 0 the previous financial year. And in total, in 2023-2024, we had 26 incidents. And in the last financial year, 2024-2025, we had 47, and almost double the number of acts of vandalism at the school. So what is it that we've seen in terms of the holiday security? In terms of our analysis, Mr. Lauriston, Safe Schools supported 475 schools with a subsidy for holiday security. 131 of the schools were supported with 24-hour security. And those are schools in hotspot areas, right? Where if you leave a piece of copper pipe open for one night, it's gone the next day, right? It happens. And that 344 schools were supported with 12-hour security. So they would be either night or day, depending on the requirement of the school and the agreement that's in place. 47 incidents of burglary and of vandalism, which affected 35 schools, were reported to the Safe Schools call center. 47 events, 35 schools, which means that one school was hit more than once in certain areas as well, right? They target certain schools, and I'll show you, which rooms at the schools they're even targeting from the data that we have collected. 7 schools reported multiple incidents, the point I made. 21 schools that had guarding services reported break-ins and burglaries and vandalism. So even though we had security there, they would still come and try to come and steal whatever they deem necessary for their purposes. 7 schools reported burglary and vandalism, even though they only had school-funded security and community support. One of these schools had both school-funded and Safe Schools subsidized guarding services, yet they still burgled at the school. The schools, though, where the community has taken ownership of the school, it's a very different school. The incidence of vandalism and burglary is significantly lower. Why? Because the community around the school calls the principal to say, there's unwanted persons here on our school's premises. This is our principal's report, Sir Chairperson. There are unwanted persons on our premises. They take ownership of the school. And many of them actually go to this group on the school to say, hey, you don't belong here, leave our school and go off the premises. They're not necessarily parents of the school, but it's community members who have stepped up to say, we want to protect our asset, which is important for our learners. And so where we have that kind of engagement with communities, it's very positive. And we have seen a dramatic decline in those particular schools. Schools that did not have any guarding services, there were 7 schools that also reported burglaries and vandalism, but there was no services provided to those particular schools. Just to say the 470 schools, how they are decided upon, it's also a cluster of schools that we take. For example, in the Delft area, we'll take a cluster of schools together, right? On a scale of economy, we get a better price for the security if 20 schools are applying for the service than one school going at a time. Because the company will say, we're going to charge you, because you want one service, we're going to charge you 10,000. But you are 20 coming, we'll say, okay, because you are 20, our services are close by, we can have one central kind of store or strong room or group of services, and we provide service at the school with walkie-talkies, and we can respond from a central point fairly quickly. We're going to charge you 80 Rand. And so from that perspective, there is a bit of a saving when we cluster the holiday security. So what does it look like? In Metro Central, Mr. Lauriston, a number of schools that received the subsidy was 108. 11 of the schools only reported incidents. So good news story there, right? In the Metro Central District, only 11 of the 108. 4 in the Metro East District of the 87 schools, 1 in the Metro North District of 87 schools, 4 in Metro South of 62, 2 in the Overberg of 26, 2 in the Cape Winelands of 52, 9 in the Eden Central Karoo of 33, and 2 in the West Coast of 20. There were vandalism incidents. There were 35 at the 475 schools. But just to say that even within our metro districts, we saw a decrease. But strange enough, in some of the rural areas, there's a bit of an increase in terms of the number of incidents of vandalism. And so this particularly in newly developing areas, like in the Mossel Bay area, we'll find that Indwe and schools in that area, there's a slight increase because it's a relatively new community that's still establishing itself. People don't necessarily know each other that well. People are just settling, and we find these incidents occurring in those areas. So what does it look like? What are the areas that are targeted, Mr. Lawrison? The next slide. So we've had issues around Bent Palisade fencing. Oaklands High School is on my route to work every day, and I drive past it. And during the holidays, somebody got a new GTI for Christmas, I think, Chairperson, took a fast turn around the corner, climbed the pavement, went into the fence, damaged the fence of the school. I took photos of the car, the number plate, and the damage to the fence. I went to the school when the schools reopened. I said, Principal, here is the detail of the person who damaged your fence. Please follow up and get the money to fix the fence. Of course, the school tried to do that. They followed up with the person. He denied that it was him. I've got the photos of him standing there. He says, I'm not in the car. How do you know it's me? Very clever. But if all our people in our community stand up to these kind of things, we can protect our assets. But because we turn away and we look the other way, Chairperson, this is when the opportunity increases for those to cause disruption at our schools. A church gate that was damaged, the damaging of the fencing 11. Chairperson, the fence around the school is a very expensive commodity. It's a very expensive exercise for this department to replace 20, 30, 40, 50 meters of fencing. It's quite a pricey exercise. And really, you know, to be folded up and put onto a bakkie to be taken to a scrapyard just doesn't make sense, Chairperson. You know, and that is the reality. Around your SA metals, etc., when you see those bakkies coming there, lining up to go in, a lot of materials that are on there is actually school fencing to some extent that's been taken off, or even the new fencing that is cut off and taken away and just being sold off as scrap metal, and it should have been protecting our learners. The jumping of the fence where the top is curled over, that is, there were 27 incidents of that. There were 5 that happened outside of the school premises. Most of those are fires that people make on the outside of the school fence and then damages the fence as well. And then there were 2 unknown issues. Then access to the building was gained through the ceiling or the roof in 5 instances. The door, the security gate was removed or damaged, 11 of the incidents. The garage door of a school also, 2 incidents of that. The outside door that was damaged as well, 21 of those incidents. And then windows, there were 8 that were taken out and damaged to gain access into a class. So what are the target areas? There are classrooms. I don't know whether it is to steal the books or the textbooks to go and study. But there seems to be a great interest, 7 of the cases of where classrooms were broken into. But a sad story, I can tell you, is that the reason why people steal a textbook is not to go and do some extra homework. Is because they tear off the cover of the book. And the inside pages of a textbook is white paper. And if you go to a place that buys in paper, this paper, white paper, has a higher value than a magazine paper, than a colored paper, because white paper is able to be pulped again. And that is why it has a higher cost. So a textbook that we pay for 200 Rand, for example, somebody will tear the cover off, take it to a scrap collector, get 20 cents for that piece of paper, because they see it as paper, and 20 cents they'll get for it. And a textbook for a child is removed in that process. That's a reality, colleagues. You know, another example, a photocopier machine at a school where we had made a decision to close the school. There was a bit of community unrest around it. Sorry. You'll ask me the question about the textbook. Okay. Fine. Must I continue, Chair? Okay, thank you. So there are 7 classrooms, 5 are electrical equipment that was stolen, fence 4, hostels 6, break-ins at hostels, 3 in kitchens, outside lights and fittings, and then of course outside plumbing, and of course windows as well. In terms of our textbook delivery, the next slide, Mr. Lauriston. Each year schools are afforded an opportunity to procure top-up textbooks for the coming school year. Seamless ordering process for textbooks were activated on the 13th to the 24th of May for top-up textbooks required for the 25 school year. The functionality was activated for all 1,465 schools to provide a requisition for grade R to grade 12. All 1,465 schools accessed the functionality and signed off on the textbook ordering process. Some schools ordered, some didn't, but they indicated even if they didn't apply for textbooks. The delivery of ordered textbooks was delivered to schools by 11th of October of last year already. Of course, you must understand now we've ordered extra textbooks, but now with all the new learners that have applied, we may have to apply for more textbooks for those particular schools. Textbooks are required for newly established schools as well, and where additional classrooms are procured as requested by schools. Textbooks to address the additional learners accommodated at the schools are being requested as we are being requested by school. Thank you, Chairperson. That is my part of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. That was a marathon session that you gave us there. I think Mr. Walters will no doubt introduce the next round.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chairperson, we move on now to the National Senior Certificate presentation. Mr. Lauriston will do the presentation. Mr. Lauriston is the DDG for curriculum, and he's in charge of the entire exam system overall, but also because he's also in charge of teaching and learning. That is his area. So ask Mr. Lauriston to please just take us through these results. As I did say in the opening remarks, they are the best results the WCD ever achieved in its history. And clearly Mr. Lauriston is going to show some of the highlights in relation to these results. So I'm going to ask Mr. Lauriston to please take us through the presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, Chair. Allow me to start off by just highlighting once again our vision statement by saying quality education for every child in every classroom in every school. And with that said, it means that the grade 12 result must be a culmination of all the efforts over the 12 to 13-year period that a child is within a school system, and not necessarily what we achieve at the end of grade 12. So I would like to highlight some of the highlights, but also show areas that we're definitely going to focus on further to improve the result even more in 2025, to show to the House that we are actually building a system and not just focusing on a grade to obtain results at the end of a year. So I think for us to just understand the results in context, because once I put up results like that, I can paint you a picture because there's no context added to those results. And I can take you down any road and make the picture as wonderful as I want you to see it. However, the context is also something that tells us and explains us what the roadmap is for further engagement within the system. But let's take a look at who achieved the results that we see on the screen there. This class group, they were subjected to they were subjected to trimmed ATPs over the period. So they had scaled down curriculum in grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, and grade 11, but not in grade 12. So they wrote the full examination in grade 12. They were also the class group who started during the COVID years 2020. So they entered the high school period in grade 8 in 2020, which means that transition period that is required for a child to actually move from grade 7 into grade 8 seamlessly, that was disrupted. Then we had the reduction in the content subjects for these learners as well, and that then impacted on the subject choices they made in grade 10, which we'll also find that there was quite a few subject changes that we saw in grade 10 and in grade 11 as we leading up to the grade 12 results. So the knowledge of the subject limited their choices also in some cases. These learners also saw rotational attendance. Some of them attended every second day, others attended every third day, some attended twice a week. So there were different permutations of how they attended school during this 2020 and 2021 period. And this obviously had an impact on the content knowledge that they had and that we had to look at once they've entered grade 10, 11, and 12 to make sure that they are ready to actually write the examination at the end of the year. Another factor that they were subjected to was the school-based assessment and examinations. Within 2020 as well as in 2021, these learners had more focus on school-based assessment tasks than that they were actually exposed to examinations and the skills that they actually had to acquire in grade 8 and 9 before they enter in the FET phase. And that was also one of the areas that we had to focus on when we prepared them to write this examination. So this is just a context to understand who we are dealing with here, because these were candidates that wrote the examination and not just numbers on the screen as they appear there. Then we also had, over the time period, changes in the format of question papers. Over the 3 to 4 year periods that these learners entered the high school, the life sciences question paper changed format, the mathematical literacy question paper changed format, technical sciences, geography changes their format, and this stability when they reached grade 12 also contributed to their results that they have achieved. But this class had an uninterrupted academic year in 2022, 2023, and 2024. And I think that shows what can be done if there's no interruptions, even community protest or taxi disruptions that they didn't see like in the previous years in 2020, where we actually had to bus all the learners to the examination centers. These learners had quite a calm, if I can put it like that, period in preparing for their grade 12 year. Then we also improved our monitoring, our internal monitoring system, because we understand that our internal monitoring system will allow us to actually zoom into the areas that actually requires the change. And there we insisted on corrective action throughout the year. And we made sure that what was promised to these learners, that they actually received it over the period. So ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, this is then the class of 2024. And they achieved remarkable results over the years. Once we look at the results, then we're going to find that in 2020, we had 51,633 candidates who successfully wrote the examination. 2021, these are not the ones that are entered. These are the ones that entered. I'll come back to that, who successfully sat for the examination. So it's 57, 60,062, and then 62,863 in 2024. What does that mean for us? That means that over this period, we have retained more learners writing the examination within the grade that they had there. The turnout rate was much higher, better than any other year before this. So I feel that because we had the stability in the 3 years preparing these learners for grade 12, they were more comfortable to write the examinations, and you can compare it with 2020, and you'll see that later in the data, where quite a few of the learners did not pitch for the examination because they did not feel comfortable and prepared well enough to write this examination. So if you look there, you'll see the number of learners who sat for the examination increased over time. Equally so, if you look at the bachelor's degrees that we had there, 22,000, 26,000, 25,000, 26,000, and eventually we in the 30,000 category with the number of learners that we have there. So not only did we increase the number of learners with a B degree pass, we've also increased the percentage. So usually the tendency is the higher the numbers, there must be a drop in the pass rate or the quality of the passes. In this case, this class showed us differently. And I think one of the reasons is that there was a more focused approach on skills that these learners require to prepare for the matric examination. So there you can see 43, 45, 42, 42, and then we had 47.8% of these learners there. And equally so, if you combine the B degree passes and the diploma passes, those are your two quality indicators in the pass rate, then you find that almost 73% of our learners in that category where they actually have access to some form of higher education and studies. However, just for noting, all our learners may access higher institutions for higher learning. That means that includes TVET colleges as well as universities that offers degrees for them to study. Obviously, this doesn't equate to the requirements that the universities or the institutions actually give us there. Then I want to get to the pass rate itself. So there, once again, you can see that we've increased the number of passes from 41,000 to 54,000, which means it's a cumulative increase over the period of 10,790 candidates that we actually have pushed through this examination. Sorry, it's 11,230. The number of learners who actually wrote the examination is 10,000, which means that more learners pass than what learners that we actually entered into the grade 12 system that we had there as well. If you look at what I've said at the beginning, the number of learners who entered the examination, so there were about 64,360 of them who were registered to write the examination this year. 62,862 wrote the examination. So that shows you a turnout rate of 97.7 percentage points, which is 2.3% of the cohort that did not complete the examination. But we'll speak to that as well later during the presentation. Then I also want to highlight this 97.7 was also the highest that we had in years, because previously it was 90, it hovered within the area of 96.8, 96.8, 96.5, 94.2% of the learners. So there always a margin of learners that you find that do not come to write the examination for various reasons. And those are one of the things that we actually zoom into, or will even zoom into further in 2022, to make sure that every child who actually reached grade 12 should actually sit for the examination, be comfortable to write the examination at the end of the year. So those incomplete learners that we had 1,497 of them. That equated to the 2.3% of the learners, of which 215 of them were progress learners who was also in grade 12. Just for the house, just to note that of the 64,360 learners who registered for the examination, we had 19,604, 46 of them indicating that they are Afrikaans speaking, 24,869 indicating that they're English speaking, and 18,849 indicating that they're isiXhosa speaking. And that gives us a 30.5% for Afrikaans, 38.6% for English, and 29.2% of the cohort that wrote said that they were isiXhosa speaking. Then we also had South African Sign Language home language, and I need to mention this. We had 13 learners, and we also had the best learner in the country that attended the event in Gauteng. If we look at the participation for the 2024 National Senior Certificate, one of the major things is the preparation of learners. You cannot say that the learner can just write the examination. We need to coach them to get to the end point. And these are the activities that we did over the year with them. We're not going to change them a lot because it's a recipe that works, but there are certain areas that we're going to enhance for 2025 to actually make sure that we reach even higher heights at the end of 2025. So our focus point of this is both the learner and the teacher. So on the slide, I only highlight what we did for the learners. So we had the Back on Track, we had the Tips for Success, which I find is a very informative booklet for our learners. The telematics are available, revision material is available, as well as matric support booklet that we issue to every learner, where they can have a look at old question papers and practice question papers with answers in there. So these are good resource materials that we push into the system, that I would encourage, if you speak to any grade 12 learner in your community, that you please encourage them to utilize this effectively, because it can assist them to reach the endpoint, specifically the 2 tips for success, as well as the matric support, and the watching the telematics on Open TV would also be beneficial to them on Saturday mornings that we have there. So our focus was both the learner as well as the teacher. So what did we do for the teacher? For the teacher, we had a program called Just in Time. So I think our teachers are quite capable and knowledgeable of what is expected of them and what they must be teaching in the class, because besides the CAPS document, we also have the examination guidelines, which guides our teachers how to prepare our learners for the end of the year. If a learner would like to know what they should know for the examination, they must also have a look at the examination guidelines, which they will also find a reference to in our tips for success. But what we did with the teachers was a 1+9. So every 1 day out of 10 teaching days, we pulled out the teachers and we actually showed them how to present certain sections of the work to make sure that they develop the skills. Because one of the things that we do have in our system is quite a few novice teachers that are teaching in grade 12. So we actually zoomed in on not what to teach, which that's in the documents, but how to teach is that we can say it comes from experience. Then we also focused highly on examination preparation. I've highlighted some of the programs that we had there, but one of the things that we also did was zoom into the underperforming schools by showing them what information is in the diagnostic report, because at the end of every examination, they produce a diagnostic report per subject paper, so that the subject can then actually analyze and see how the learners responded to different types of usage of language, types of questions, and whether they could approach certain questions in specific ways. So the diagnostic report was highlighted and it was shown all over to the district offices. Plus, what we do differently to any other province is we supply a per question analysis per school for every school in the province. So these are all the success indicators that I think that we will not change, but we will enhance for 2025 and see how best we can do that. And as indicated, our HOD also met with all the schools at risk to ensure that they understand what they should achieve at the end of 2024. So once again, I want to highlight certain things that I think is important. The study guides that we used, the examination guidelines that are available on the DBE website. So we definitely align with those documents, the diagnostic reports there, and the schools have a per question analysis to assist teachers to focus on areas in their specific schools to actually enhance their teaching and learning process there. Then we also had clear target setting with regards from our district offices. And there we met regularly to actually track whether these targets they are on par with these targets and whether we are actually going to meet our targets. It is a process because target setting is not an exact science. And learners do not always respond in the way that you want them to because things happen in their lives. So the target setting was always an ongoing negotiation to make sure that the information that we have per learner, because what we also advocated was that every learner has a name and a face, and that is why they should be important for us when we do our monitoring. And we insisted on corrective action and support. And therefore, our wellness programs for teachers as well as learners were also introduced within this process. So what did we prepare for? It is quite a logistical challenge to prepare for a matric examination and make it a smooth run at the end of the day. I think people always think that an examination person, a person who works in examination only works once a year because the learners only write once a year. That's not true because it's we work in 3 cycles every time. It's the examination that we've done, the one that we're planning for, and the one that is following that one. So you always work in 3 examination cycles in one go. So it's never a point where you can say we can stop and we can take a vacation because you'll just go on to the next examination. So what we had, we prepared for 64,360 candidates, of which 11,296 part-time were enrolled, and we have to add them to the 64,360 candidates that we have there. We had 123 question papers that was printed, noting that we only offer 68 subjects in the province. That and the others are all additional that we source in from other examination bodies. So we offer a broader scope of subjects to our learners for them to write it. And then we had about 35 million images that had to be printed, and that resulted in about 9,000 answer scripts. And one of the things that we don't do is we don't lose an answer script, because if we don't have an answer script, we don't have a mark. So that's one of the important things that we do attend to meticulously. Every single process that I have on this slide, we attend to meticulously, because we do not lose and we don't know of where things are in examinations. We know exactly where they are and what security measures have to be taken. So the examination centers are 474 candidates, and both the full-time and part-time candidates were accommodated at these centers. And then we had our invigilators that were well trained. We have a manual in which we do train them, and it's one of the requirements that you cannot invigilate if you do not go through the training with us, to make sure that you understand exactly what is expected of you. I must also indicate I'm extremely proud of our principals and our invigilators in the manner in which they've conducted the examination. I think we can be exceptionally proud of them, because we can say that we ran a credible examination within this province. To get this 900,000 answer scripts ready for processing, where I can say I give you a result, I need markers. So we had about 4,000 markers in the system, and those markers mark the 900,000 scripts within a period of 10 days at 13 marking centers. Just apology, that 12 should be a 13 there and 11 should be a 12. So that about the schools and centers where we have them. Taking us through into the next part will be the marking process. Just to emphasize, one of the requirements of that we have to speak to marking as well, that we note that we also have a competency test, a subject-based competency test, just to give surety to the public that our teachers do submit themselves to continuous professional development. They write these tests and they utilize it to grow as teachers in the process, because the test not only tests knowledge, but also the competencies of marking. Because once your answer script is there, we want a competent marker to mark the script and ensure that for the marks or the facts that they've penned on the paper there. So we put a lot of effort into ensuring that our markers are well trained. They cannot mark if they're not trained, In some cases, they cannot mark if they didn't write the competency test. And in many cases, we also, or in all cases, sorry, not many, but in all cases, we ensure that they also must be authorized. So it's quite a vigorous process that we put all markers through for 2 days before we even start marking, before the first script is actually touched. We don't just mark it and say, here's the marking guideline, because it can be interpreted differently by different people. So ensure standard across the province, but also across the country, and Umalusi signs off on that process. So we had a staggered marking process, which placed us a little bit under pressure because the Afrikaans home language paper 2 and FAL was written quite at the end of the examination. So we started with the marking a little bit later there, but we appointed more teachers in the process to ensure that we can reach the end date of 13 December and publish the results as accurately as possible on the 13th of January. Some of the question papers were also marked centrally. That means in Pretoria. We didn't take responsibility for all the question papers, so that's what it is there. This is just an overview of the numbers that we have employed there. But what I want to highlight to the committee chairperson is that the 628 and the 3166, that's your first line in a marking process. What we do not exceed there is the 1:5 ratio. We make sure that the 1:5 ratio of that we can ensure quality marking is taking place there. So every senior marker takes responsibility for 5 markers, and we do not mark full question papers. We mark questions in a paper, so people specializes in questions, so that we make sure that we have really a focus on what we are doing, and that it is as accurately as possible, and that no learner is advantaged unnecessary or disadvantaged unnecessary in the process. So that is something that we very stringently implement to ensure that we meet that criteria. We also test ourselves once we have remarks to make sure that there's no deviation in the marks as well. We also have a double capturing system, which means the marks don't get captured once. It gets checked first, then it gets captured, and then it gets captured again to make sure that what we have on the system is as accurate as possible, humanly possible that we have. And noting that this is 70,000 candidates that wrote 900 scripts, and all of them are individual marks, and noting that we capture per question per learner. We don't capture the total only. So that gives us a double check and balance within the system to ensure that we have that. Then if I go to the next slide, I just want to highlight what we do have here, the overall pass rate. And I think what is very clear, which I already highlighted, is just in a different format, is where we moved from the numbers that have written, that entered, versus the numbers that have passed, versus the pass percentage that we have there. But as said, 86.6 is an exceptionally good result. I've highlighted the success indicators, but we now have to discover what brought us here so that we can take ourselves to the next level and understand and disaggregate that 86.6 in such a way that from an educational point of view, we know exactly what brought us here and what are the elements that are going to take us further. And equally so with the access to the bachelor's degrees, and then the numbers and the figures that we have there, and how best we're going to improve on the quality of the passes that we have within our system. So if we look at the number of passes that we had, we increased from 41,250 in 2020 to 46,875 in 2021, and we moved up into 49,000, and then we moved up into 50,000, and we're now at 54,414 candidates, which means it's about plus minus 3,794 more candidates that we had than the previous year. Colleagues, it's a lot of learners and we're extremely proud of them. And if you look from 2024 to 2024, another plus is 13,164 more candidates actually passed there or obtained the qualification. Let me put it like that, they obtained the NSC qualification. Noting that this is one of the highest that we had since 2008. That is the year when the NSC qualification was introduced in the country. So of the 62,863 that wrote the examination, 54,414 met the requirements, they obtained the qualification, which means 8,449 candidates did not satisfy the pass requirements. So once again, I want to highlight here, when a learner does not achieve in his or her home language, they do not obtain the qualification. They actually fail the examination. So it's quite important that we understand home language is one of the requirements that you must pass before we even look at the other pass requirements. Of this 8,449 candidates, 1,227 candidates failed their home language. But only 65 of them only failed the home language, which I find is exceptionally good because previous years we had quite a few of the learners failing, more learners failing only their home language. And this year, only 65. The others, they failed the home language plus another subject. So the biggest contributor to our failure rate is learners not obtaining 30% for 2 subjects, which is about 65.1% of our cohort. And we will definitely bring that down or try to bring it down because we'll focus on the elements that we may or may not have missed during 2024 because should we include more of the at-risk learners in our Saturdays and holiday programs. But those are the engagements that we currently have and the small nuances that we will change to actually see how best we can reach a better endpoint at the end of 2025. So I've also highlighted the quality of the passes that I've given you. But one of the things that we have to look at is the combined mark for bachelor's and B degrees. And I think that for me is an exceptional indicator of quality in the system and the passes that we have there. I'm also going to show you later in the presentation of what it looks like if we look at the quality and contributors of the Western Cape in certain subjects. So there you have an overview of what happened in the province. We're extremely proud of all our 8 districts. All of them achieved above 80%. And we are definitely, our plans are already in place for 2025. And although we say we do not drive a competition, but a system, it is important that people understand that all the districts are contributing, irrespective of what you see on the screen, are contributing to the collective pass rate of the Western Cape Education Department. And therefore, we are extremely proud of our officials, as well as our teachers and our principals, for taking charge of our learners in the system to make sure that we can actually display these results with pride, to say that 2 of our districts moved out from the 70s, they're all in the 80s that we see there. And also noting that all 54,414 candidates that I've mentioned actually qualify for tertiary institutions or further studies. I think I would like to highlight just the spread that we have quintile 1 schools, 2 schools, 3 schools, and 4 schools in our systems, and that is just the enrollment figures that we have there. I'll speak to that as well later on. And there we can see the impact of the quintiles. And once again, what I said is when we take the data and we disaggregate it, we find that we start working and noting the areas of intervention that requires further analysis and attention from our side. However, I want to show point out to you that all the quintiles achieved above 80% pass rate is something that we have never saw in this. We also note that we still have to look at the learners who did not complete compared to the cohort that is enrolled in that specific quintile. So there's a lot of work and focus areas that we'll put into the lower quintiles to make sure that they can compete with the rest of our learners. Just for noting that I spoke to the language and the division of the language, and what we also find is that one of the things that we have to actually look at is when we do a grouping of Afrikaans, English, isiXhosa, is to check whether all the learners are adequately prepared for the examination. Now, if you look at that, one of the success indicators there is that we almost had a 97% turnout rate in all those groupings, which means all those learners were quite adequately prepared. We did find a difference in pass rate in English, Afrikaans, and isiXhosa. So where isiXhosa had the lowest one, all still in the 80s, 83, and then Afrikaans 85, and then English 89. That just shows us how we analyze to make sure that we can keep track of whether our interventions in the different areas are working. But with that says, another indicator from the isiXhosa group is they the only group that has for 5 consecutive years increased the pass rate. From 78, they went up to, in the 80s, 83, which means the interventions, whether it's language across the curriculum, the vocabulary building that is required, that has been coming through the diagnostic reports and pushing in there, and the teachers taking charge, the collective teacher development processes, the JIT, just-in-time projects that we have, and all of this actually culminating in the success that we are achieving in these specific groups that we have. So, ladies and gentlemen, if I look at the overall pass rate per district, then we can look there and we analyze, then we can see that once again, in our no fee charging schools as well as our fee charging schools is also an indicator that we have, that we've seen in the national reports, and we share it with you here to also give you a sense of what areas we have to focus on for 2025. However, with that said, we're extremely proud of what we have achieved in these schools as well. Our fee-paying schools, those are those schools that we have there, the bachelor's passes, diplomas, and certificates. So it gives us a good indication of where we would like to end with these schools and make sure that we channel correctly our interventions so that we up the game for these learners, because we make sure that they can actually use the certificate that we actually issue them at the end of the grade 12 year. Once again, another story that we have is the distinctions. We increased the number of distinctions from 24,948 in 2023 to 27,927, which means that is 2.3 distinctions per learner of the 11,684 learners that brought us these distinctions. Just noting, they're not confined to certain schools or quintiles. They were, I proudly say, they were spread across all our schools here, because I think our teachers understand what it means to utilize the examination guidelines, how to prepare the learners adequately for the end of the year, but make sure that they understand and they have the practice booklets in hand to enhance what they are doing. Then the number of learners who achieved the bachelor's, I think we've highlighted that. Don't have to go into that again. But I think one of the other requirements that we also had, and which we also feel extremely proud of, I just want to clarify the slide there on. It will be on some people's, not the table, the side with the bars. 58 doesn't mean it's 58 schools that are underperformed. That's the number of schools in the district. So you can see West Coast, we have 1 school underperforming under 60. In Overberg, 0. Metro South, 0. Metro North, 0. Metro East, 0. Metro Central, 3. Eden and Central Karoo 0 of the 49, and Cape Winelands 1 of the 63. That gives us the 5 underperforming schools that we have shown there in 2024. So from 2020, where we had 52, we moved down to 40, we moved down to 31, we moved down to 31, we stayed at 31, and this year we only have 5 schools performing under 60%. Obviously, we cannot stay there. We have to change the game plan, and we have to up our performance. So if we up our performance to 70%, we move into 33 schools that will require special attention from us this year to make sure that they don't become yo-yos in the process, meaning that one year they performing and the next year they go back, because 12 of the schools that are in the 70% category were schools that were in the 60% category the previous year. So we definitely have this in hand, but we're extremely proud of the inputs of our principals, our officials, once again, and the commitment of our teachers and our HOD who went to each one of these, who had engagement with each one of these schools in 2023 to make sure that they understand exactly what it is, and we had a positive engagement with them, not one where we actually say, listen, you're doing stuff wrong. It is what can we assist you with and how can we assist you, giving advice. And I think these schools really, and the district officers took the advice, and they actually made sure that we don't end up with more underperforming schools in this regard. I think it's also important to look at mathematics, because that's one of the requirements there, and that's our contribution to the national mathematics results. So you can see the pass rate there is 78% of the 11,000 of the 14,979 learners who enrolled for mathematics. That can be further analyzed, because one of the things that we have to look at is the participation rate. But what is important to note here, once you get into the 50% and above, you'll find that we had 44 percentage points there, 6,584. It's almost 10,000 of the 14,000 learners that are in that category. So our quality of passes, besides being the best, the quality of passes for me is more important, and our contribution to the quality of passes in the country is exceptionally high. And I think this is something that we have maintained, but we also have to get more learners enrolled, and we have plans and we have specific projects that we've learned from over the past 2 years. They are quite exciting projects that we can also name, where learners are being coached to do mathematics and physical sciences in challenging areas, and they're actually proving that the results can be obtained in any community. So it's important that we understand that completely and that we drive this up as well. So what does this mean? It means that our learners can access higher institutions in the courses that they would like to study. So it's good just to pass mathematics, but if you don't get access to university or the system or the course that you would like to study, you find that those learners struggle to actually achieve it over time. So we're exceptionally proud of that. Same with with physical sciences. If you take the above 50%, we almost had 76% of our learners are in the 50 and above category for physical sciences, and there you can compare that and see it's still low numbers. We can improve. What I did not add here, because we also have technical sciences in the system, those numbers could also be added here. But what you have here is once again, our performance and our contribution to the quality of passes that we have in the system, which we feel extremely proud of. So once again, one of the questions that were asked is what are our plans for underperforming or achievement? So as indicated, we will have a differentiated approach. Obviously, we'll have those schools that are as per our cutoff, underperformance, but then we also have schools that are in a yo-yo category or in the category that is still at risk, because we do believe we need to keep them on this in this place for about 3 years to ensure that it gets institutionalized. So there will definitely be clear monitoring and support. District has a focused improving the basic functionality in each one of these schools, because many times what we find, we focus on the curriculum, and the curriculum is basically not the issue, but more of the challenge of leadership and the functionality at the school. So that will be one of our foci that we will implement in 2025. Then we'll also make sure that the posts are filled, the vacant posts specifically on the SMTs as well as the principals posts that we have there. On learner performance, definitely a profiling of learners as per the grade 11 results, to make sure that we understand who we are teaching, because every learner is important to us. Smaller districts, where I just highlight to you, in a smaller district like Overberg or West Coast, if we have one learner that do not achieve, that's a high percentage of dropout that you have in your district. So we push that as well. And then our tutoring and holiday classes, alignment with the grade 12 back on track program. And what we're going to try to achieve is to get more learners who can achieve into this program, so that we reach more learners, but continue on the other side with our teacher development, our JIT, just-in-time program, because we do find that that as not only for that class, but other spin-offs in the school, because that teacher doesn't only teach that grade in our schools. Our learner motivation and staff morale is also the boosting program. And then teachers and learner attendance, there's two things that we require. Once learners must be present, teachers must be present as well as prepared for teaching and learning to take place. So learner attendance firstly should be something that we actually, that will be monitored, and then officials monitor weekly, monthly and quarterly basis this as well. And as indicated, we have the recipe, we can improve, but we can enhance certain elements in our plans and not add new things, because I do think we can also paralyze the system by constantly adding new things into the curriculum space. Then on the curriculum coverage, our SMTs at schools will definitely be monitoring our SBA completion, our school-based assessment completions. We have it electronically so that the districts now can track it and can see exactly which schools are not capturing any marks from the beginning, because it's a continuous assessment mark, not an end of year mark that is being submitted to the department. Further on that, we have the head of education performance review visits to our districts. It's not a scary event. It is the head visiting the district offices, but asking very pertinent questions, because when anybody starts working, you do find that you can develop tunnel vision, and this critical friend that the head then plays with is DDGs becomes an important event and activity to ensure that there's constant alignment, constant reminder, but push, and that the corrective measures are being implemented. Targets are reviewed, as I've indicated earlier. Then the management and leadership, we have a curriculum management instructional leadership program that we will implement in certain schools to make sure that there's common understanding in the system of how a curriculum should be managed, and not interpretations from different individuals working in the system. So that is something that we're pushing to bring even further stability in our system in 2025. Then curriculum training and support for educators. Extensive support will be offered to the WC Curriculum Subdirectorate. This includes the support to educators on how to use school-based data for differentiated support, and I think that is an important activity for specifically our novice teachers entering the system. And then the profiling of schools, teachers and learners, and setting targets and tracking the performance. I've highlighted the tips for success, so we're not going to go into that, but our exam preparation, believe it as it may, also focus on reading techniques that we have there. So this is the number of learners who did not complete the examination. There you can see that we have over time, we have 2.3% 6%, and those are per quintile. So that gives us a clear indication on the areas that we're going to zoom in to make sure that we have the system performing and not certain schools within the system performing that we have there. The last part of this presentation is the wellness support for matric and learners. This is part of what is available on our website as well for both the teachers and our learners itself. And I just have to indicate there's a wealth of very nicely structured resource material that learners can access, as well as our teachers to assist them in preparing for the end of the year. So the Western Cape Education Department offers a variety of wellness resources for our grade 12 learners, and these include the mental health and self-care. So we have resources to help you to manage the stress, the anxiety, and our tips for success is also being mediated by our psychologists in the district to make sure that the learners understand the minimum requirements to identify these concepts and know whether they are suffering of it as well. Cyber wellness, I think guidance on how to stay safe and responsible online, because as soon as they go online, we must make sure that they understand what it means to be responsible users of online platforms and their rights and respects. I think that is equally as important, because we do find in our system that the boy learners, although the boy learners and the girl learners improve their pass rates in this examination, more girls are reaching grade 12 than boy learners. But pass rate is the same. But the B degree pass rate, there's a big difference in what the girl learner is achieving compared to what the boy learners are achieving. And that shows that we cannot just focus on content when we prepare these learners, but there should be other alternative programs that we introduce them to make sure that they actually can get a better result and participate to obtain the qualifications with a better qualification, a better pass of the qualification that we have there. I think the class of 2024 made us once again extremely proud. And I think that not only do we have Pinelands High School of the position number 1 and number 2. And we're extremely proud of Pinelands High School for achieving this. And the other results of the school looked exceptionally well as well. So it was not outlier performance in the school. But we're extremely happy for Rayan Ibrahim, who was not only appointed as a top candidate in the country, but the top candidate in quintile 5, and as well as the top candidate in the Western Cape, but also the top candidate for physical sciences in the Western Cape. And then secondly, with Christopher Wise, his counterpart at the school, was then also crowned the top mathematics candidate in the province. And therefore, we have a very good news story to tell about the class of 2024. And we definitely hope to repeat that in 2025 by not adding to the process, but more to enhance what we are already doing and zoom into certain areas through our analysis that we have there. Chairperson, I also do note that I couldn't go into all the areas in detail, but there are certain more areas that we can have a deeper dive into and to make sure that we have a better understanding. But we are also doing our own reporting on this for the HOD and the Minister. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Lauriston. And thank you to Mr. Mayor for those presentations. It's been a very comprehensive set of presentations that we've had, and I think we're very, very thankful for that. I think at this stage, we probably all need a bit of a body break and some refreshments. So I'm proposing that we take a short break. It's according to my time here, it's 14 minutes past 3. Let's do it for about 20 minutes. And if we can be back here at 25 to 4, and then we can resume and take questions, because we know that teaching staff should not be working after 4 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon. Thanks very much. Refreshments are down the passage, and there's an information desk outside if anybody wishes to have a discussion there with the Education Department officials. Thank you very much. And I now want to give the members of the committee an opportunity to ask questions of the department following the two presentations that we have had. So I think if I can hand over, I see the hands of Member Christian and then Member Stevens and then Member Bosman.
Chairperson, must I ask all the questions? How are you going to handle it?
I think, look, if you've got quite a few questions, ask 2 or 3 of them, and then we'll do another round thereafter.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you for the department. I know it's a difficult job, but well done for the presentation and the insight. Maybe just on the admissions, I just want to ask on page 5 about, grade 8 learners, if they did apply on time, but I see here on one, that's Metro East, Metro North, Metro South, so you still have enormous numbers there, 165, 102. What is the reason for that? And I heard Chairperson Mr. Meyer said, people that want pupils in certain places, but that is still a big number. And I'm not talking about the percentages, and Mr. Meyer answered what they're doing in the meantime to accommodate those learners that's not placed with the packs. If we build all the classrooms and schools that the department is doing, and with the reduction of teachers in the new year, do we have enough teachers to fill those classrooms and those schools? Maybe that is a question. I know about the 477 additional posts. And is the department looking at people that, ended their contracts last year to be accommodated in those some of those peoples? I know specific skills and stuff is needed, but do you look at those people first before you then, get other people to do that? And maybe just one more. I don't want to take all the time. Just one more. Chair, I'm going to leave it because that is only the first presentation. I'm going to leave the second presentation because there's a lot of questions in there. Thank you.
Member Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Member Christian's covered half of my questions, but I've got 2 that I want to ask now. The department roll out the application pop-up centers. I think if they did do it timelessly and not just after the closing of applications, it wouldn't be in this problem. And then what about early awareness campaigns for registration, especially in the rural areas? That is my 2 questions for now.
Member Bosman.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, in terms of the presentation on admissions, I just wanted to understand, and I know we were briefed in the previous parliament on the system that exists nationally to monitor and label learners. I just wanted to ask if there's been some movement on the plotting or monitoring of learners who are moving from other provinces into the Western Cape. I know the Western Cape uses a CMIS number and National has a very specific system that they use. I want to check if there are those conversations with other provinces so we can monitor sort of migration patterns more clearly. And then also if there are high-level discussions with the National Treasury and the DBE to look at when learners move from other schools in other provinces, whether there are options for the money that's been allocated to the departments in those provinces to also move with learners as they're moving to the Western Cape. Can I also ask on the National Senior Certificate presentation? Chair, I just wanted to ask whether there are specific case studies being written up about the success stories, two schools specifically that I've picked up in the media, Lotus River High School and then Crestway Senior Secondary School that we visited in the previous term. There's been specific interventions from retired principals and educationalists. I know Mr. Stephen Price is at Lotus River, and then Professor Jonathan Jansen is at Crestway, whether there are case studies being written up that the department is using to look at what are the lessons learned. And Chairperson, to you to perhaps ask if this committee can invite Professor Jansen and Mr. Price to the committee, or we can go visit the schools to specifically understand what have they done to take those schools from being sort of underperforming schools, and I know Crestway was the worst performing school in the previous year, to those learners now making it into the 60s and 80s. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. I think I'm going to give the department opportunity to reply here now. I think on the next round, I notice Member Kasim, Member Said, Member Litukong, and then we'll come round for another round of questions from the members.
Thank you, Chair. I'll hand over to the head of department in the team, and then I'll come back if there is.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the questions. Colleagues, we will handle some of these questions. I'll try and answer a few of them, and then the gaps you guys will fill in. There was a question about grade 8, and some of these learners applied on time, and why is this still a number? So remember, we had 100,000 applications in grade 8. So the number you see there, I think it's a few hundred, a couple of hundred. It's still a big number, but it is about the choice issue. So they've applied, and I want to go to these 3 schools. Then you make an offer to them to say, well, we got place at this school. No, thank you. We got place at this school. No, thank you. Got place at this school. No, thank you. So you reach what we call the granite point, where actually the parent and the learner doesn't want to accept the place that we offer. So in that grade 8, that's the situation in that area there. There was a question about whether we have enough teachers. I think it answered it also in the question to say, obviously there's two factors at play. One is that we do have 477 growth posts, what we call growth posts. In other words, where we get more learners, and then obviously we can see a school require, there's a system to be able to allocate that school. But we also have teachers in excess from the process that was followed. And so from that process as well, there's a drawdown. The difficulty that we have, just to explain that it's very unique to education. The system is broken up into 4 parts. There's foundation phase, there's intermediate phase, there's senior phase, and there's the FET phase or matric phase, whichever one you want to call it. So you are qualified in one of those phases, number one. And to make it worse, you are qualified in a subject, especially the top 2. So when you try and get the interoperability to send people where it's not just, oh, you're a teacher, I can actually just send you anyway. Actually, you're a foundation phase teacher, and I can only send you to foundation phase. So I think that's the constraint in relation to these things. And then there was a question about the people whose contracts we ended. Do we use them? Just remember, once we end the contract through a normal process, they then cease to be employees of ours, and they will follow and come through the application process in the normal way. They stand a big advantage over others because they got the experience. But there's still a selection process that the school has to go through. Then on the pop-up centers, Mr. Mayor, you can just maybe speak a little bit about the pop-up centers. There was a question about timing in relation to when we did that. Maybe you can also talk what we did early in the campaign on the pop-up centers. Then there was a question about the monitoring of learners who come from other provinces. I think the issue is that we do have that data. We do know when learners come from another province. There is a way in which we record that. However, the question of does the money follow is a delay between when the learner comes of years for when the money follows, because of South Africa's system and the way we actually work. So I'm sure that those who are representatives, they understand that money only follows us afterwards. And then NSC case studies on success stories. Obviously, we need to do that. I don't know if we've done that, Mr. Lauriston, but we are in agreement with that suggestion. And we would obviously encourage, if you are going to have the hearings where people are going to come and speak about what they've done, I think that's good for all schools to hear that, as to what they've done. I would say the most important thing in changing a school's direction is leadership. It's the number one thing. Without that, you can do all the other inputs, but if you don't have the leadership, then it doesn't actually coalesce into something. Did I leave out anything, Mr. Mayor? You want pop-ups, maybe?
Thank you, Chairperson. Just in terms of the pop-ups that we had now at the start of this year, it's a follow-on of what was started in last year already. In last year, we had quite a number of pop-up centers at most malls in most communities in our high intake areas. So in Khayelitsha, we had a number of pop-up opportunities for parents to visit the centers on a Saturday and a Sunday. This last round, we went with a Saturday because that was the day we found most people to be in the malls. And so it's in popular malls within an area where there's always a high demand for learner placement. I agree with you. Doing it earlier is an advantage because we could identify many more learners who had not applied on the system. The last pop-up round was not for as many new applications, it was more follow-ups. But the advantage that the parents had was that their application was captured and it wasn't something that still needed to happen. So that, and we take the comment and we definitely, it is part already of the program for next year's admissions. We will also be doing a lot of early awareness with grade 7 learners to apply. So we always do the drive to get all our grade 7 learners to apply so that we know that the learners within the province have an application to a school in the province. Must also understand that a lot of our learners at grade 7, about 2,500 going to the special school section, the School of Skills section. So they leave the mainstream public ordinary and they're going to public special school to do skills within a School of Skills environment. We also have learners who leave the public ordinary sector and going to the TVET sector. And so they then go into the colleges in the province as well, and the numbers of learners moving in there. Linked to that, the question that Member Bosman also asked about the tracking of learners. So we currently rely on what the parents capture on our SAMI system as to what their original place of residence is, where the child was last schooled, and that gives us an indicator of that the child was not in the province because the child needs to be assigned a CMIS number. So that's the linkage that we've got. But whether the child was born or raised in the Northwest province, and the parent says, well, he was in the Eastern Cape for a month or two, and so we use that as the point. That is a bit of a difficult one for us. But member is correct. If we at some point have a decision, a firm decision of moving towards the online SSMs, which the other provinces are all using, then we would be able to potentially get that data fairly quickly from a neighboring province where we have learners coming. Just in terms of the pop-ups last year, remember, there was 140 that we had. So it's quite a substantial number. You will understand also that it's quite a substantial cost as well to have those pop-ups because it's a company to set it up, the security and all of those kind of things at those particular centers. Then Member Christians asked a question about the grade 8s. I think the HOD's clarified that quite significantly. If I take the Khayelitsha area, for example, 2 years ago, we didn't have a bottleneck in the Khayelitsha area. But because schools did exceptionally well last year in the NSC exams, there's been a strong movement back into the schools in Khayelitsha area. And so a lot of parents are not getting children to commute to schools in the Cape Town, Mowbray, Athlone area. They're sending kids to the school in the Khayelitsha area because their understanding is that there's quality at the schools now in terms of the NSC pass rate. And so we've seen a resurgence of demanding for places at schools in the Metro East area in particular. So that adds to this placement of learners within that particular area. Then there was just lastly the movement of the learners with the money. We've made those appeals, Member Bosman. Our minister is on record as having done that as well in inquiring from national DBE within the various structural meetings of the DBE, whether it was the HEDCOM or the KIM. Those questions were raised as to, the budget moving with the learners, but I'm sure the minister could perhaps add more information on that one. But the questions have been asked of those strategic role players. Thank you. And then just on the case study, I know that Professor Jansen is busy with documenting what they've done at Crestway. And I had the privilege of listening to Mr. Price recently at the prize giving for the National Senior Certificate on his experience at Lotus, and it's quite an interesting story. And I think one the members of the committee would definitely benefit from, Chairperson. Thank you.
Just 2 points. I mean, as honourable members will know, the provincial equitable share review is underway with a special focus on the education component. And all these questions, which honourable members have put to us before, including quite correctly money following learners, are part of the sort of deliberations on the review of the provincial equitable share formula. And I would expect that review will sort of continue during the course of the next financial year and will then hopefully be wrapped up. I could not agree more with the honourable member that a visit by the committee to Lotus High or alternatively Crestway High, I think would be very valuable. I visited both schools. I got, really excellent value out of my engagement with Stephen Price and also with Professor Jansen on what exactly it takes to turn around a public school in the first instance, and also the fact that it can actually be done and can be done fairly rapidly. And as Alan Mayer has attested, I personally asked Professor Jonathan Jansen whether he would be prepared to write up the Crestway High School case study, which he's agreed to do. And I think that will be of enormous value to those of us who are interested in education. But I really do think it would be an excellent idea for the committee to visit the schools and actually engage with the principals.
Thanks. Thank you to Minister and to HOD and his team. Yes, I must say I am quite intrigued by the success that has been achieved in that school in Khayelitsha on their level of improvement that we've seen there. And as well in bringing down that 31 schools that were under 60% down to 5 now, because there's also an indication of that level of improvement. So certainly we will take up that as a committee and to have a look at what that level of success is. And I think the other point that you also made, Mr. Walters, in terms of that leadership and how one translates that also into trying to promote greater leadership. I know that Member Kasim's hand is up, Member Syed, and then Member Letekong as the next round of members being able to ask questions. And then we'll see Member Walters as well. So I think let's take that in this next round. And I think Member Christians, you indicated that you want to, we'll take that in the next round then. So you can go ahead, Member Kasim.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, I'm very curious to know how exactly does this department come to a conclusion when it comes to school placement that a child from a community like Swartland should go to a completely different region like Cape Town, along with many other students who are placed an hour or two from where they currently live. When there are available classrooms like at Chatsworth Primary School, among others, that could be utilized if more teachers are given employment opportunities by the department. Because it seems, Chairperson, as if the Minister's department is just placing children for the sake of placing them, especially in our coloured and African communities, not considering their backgrounds. And yes, I know, Chairperson, that there is school transportation programs, because the department spoke very long about the buses and the taxis that are available. But the reality is, Chairperson, that, and I think the department knows this as well, is that parents are currently being told that the children will not be transported if only 1 or 2 children are seeking transport in the direction of a school. We know other kids from that area are going, like in Swartland, where still this morning parents were calling for assistance on this matter. So not only are children placed in schools far from their homes, but also now battling with the transport that the education department is supposed to provide when placing kids in far areas. So, Chairperson, since the department has a tendency of placing learners in schools which are far from their homes, what is the criteria then for such a learner to qualify for this transport if there is only 1 or 2 from a remote rural area who is being placed in a school that is not 5 kilometers from their home? And then my second question, Chairperson, where exactly do the department need to intervene in order to improve matric results for the Western Cape? Because by now the department should clearly have had a detailed report that analyzes where the problem areas are and why the school results are not improving. So what intervention has the department came up with, knowing where the problem areas are? Because even school dropout cases are quite serious. And an example would be that of Menenberg High School. I done oversight there earlier this month, and the principal said the school had almost close to 100 dropouts in last year alone. And while these schools are located in drug and gang-infested communities, Chairperson, not only do they have a shortage of teachers, but also no intervention from the education department when it comes to youth programs to prevent these youth from participating or indulging in drug and gang involvement, as confirmed by the schools in such areas. So how exactly is the department prioritizing schools in such areas as of this year? These are my only questions for now, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thanks, Mem Kasim. Member Sayed.
Chair, thank you very much. And I'm not going to have too many questions. I see there's also quite a few members of the public. Perhaps they should also get a bite. But just a quick few at the beginning, I think, and as we've been sitting here, we've been seeing a lot of incidents of bullying at our schools, particularly in our communities. It's on TV. In fact, we've seen quite a bit of footage. I just wanted to get a sense from the department in light of these incidents. Do all schools, particularly the schools in our vulnerable communities, have safety plans? What support is the department and Safe Schools in particular giving to these schools to support those particular safety plans and to ensure that those safety plans are basically actually implemented? Because there are instances where Safe Schools is contacted and schools just don't get a response, or principals themselves, where we as public representatives have had to go and educate principals about how they must contact Safe Schools. So I just wanted to get a sense as to where are we at in that regard. Then with regards to, I see there's the presentation speaks about 96% of basically grade R to grade 12 applicants have been placed and resolved. I wanted to get a sense of the stats around grade R. We're often talking about grade 1s and grade 8s, but that's the foundation phase. I wanted to get a sense, well, I mean, is there some stats around grade R? And linked to that, ECDs. Could the department perhaps indicate when will those particular, because there are various ECDs again in our poor and working class communities, especially in rural areas that we come across, as well as townships, where one sees that they will never ever get to a point where they will comply because of the socio-economic circumstances. When will they be able to comply? What kind of assistance is being provided to struggling ECDs, to ECDs run by people who themselves don't have any money in order for them to actually comply? And then finally, teacher cuts. I don't want to have been speaking consistently about it, but just one question related to that. Has the department put in place, whilst we oppose the, so to put on record again, that's a view of our party that I represent, and I'm sure many others, but given that it's there now, has the department put in place any mitigating strategies for the schools that are being affected by the teacher cuts? Mitigating strategies outside of the solutions we are calling. We are obviously saying it must not happen. There must be teachers, but what other, have you thought of other mitigating strategies? And has there been basically a look at what impact this will have on the delivery of the curriculum and the functionality of our schools? Thank you.
You can go ahead, Emily.
Thank you, Chairperson. Greetings to you, the MEC, members in the House, and the members of the community. Chairperson, mine is on slide 1. When does the department plan to finally place those 586 children that are unplaced? And does the department or school have the programs in place to bring the learners up to speed since they have lost the syllabus? And on slide 7, Chair, there are new schools that you talk about that has been delivered and what is still to be delivered. So I just want to check on this new schools that have been delivered. Is Solomon Mahlangu Primary School in Kraaifontein part of these new schools that have been delivered? And if not, what could be the challenge with regards to the school in Kraaifontein? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Walters.
Thank you, Chair. Member C did cover me in terms of safety plans, but if I can just add to that, you made reference during the course of the presentation of disruptions to educational proceedings due to gangsterism. Incidents like that where the school was disrupted. I was interested in whether there is a database or a record of that. It happens to relate to the other committee or another committee I'm sitting on as well, but I think it would be useful to also have an understanding of that. I think it relates to some of the questions in terms of the challenges some of schools have. So is there in addition to the safety plan question, is there a record, an incident report? Is it data that would be available? And I would be very interested in it myself, in my own capacity, if the committee is not, but it would be interesting reading.
Thank you. I think that's that round of questions, and I see Member Christians is writing furiously, so you're preparing for the next round. Okay, handing over to you, Minister, and HOD.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the questions. We're going to try and answer the questions as best we can. So if someone could just, maybe Mr. Mayor or Mr. Abrams, just answer about the learner transport system that we have, that we need a critical mass to be able to develop a route. There need to be a certain number of learners before we actually take that route, because I think the difficulty is for us is that if we look at as you indicated, there were 1 or 2 learners who require transport. That was the question. What are we doing about that 1 or 2? We have to think in terms of the system. If every parent comes to us and says, transport your child, we will not be able to do that as a system. So then we have Mr. Mayor and Mr. Abrams can maybe just talk about the system for learner transport, how that actually works. Then just there was a question about the improving the fact that where do results come from and children drop out, and all the prevention programs with drug programs in school. Mr. Mayor can also just talk a little bit about the programs that they do have, the change behavior programs that we have, the support that we give to schools in relation to the entire drug program issues. There were questions about bullying. I just want to say that I recently just wrote a letter penned by me, which is very unusual, straight to schools, talking about videos that are being circulated. That's a criminal offense to do that, talking about bullying. And previously, I personally also have written a letter to each parent about discipline and order and the fact that they need to actually just take charge of their children. But Mr. Mayor, maybe just on the safe schools, to maybe just talk about the safe schools, how that actually works, if you can do that. As far as the issues around mitigating strategies, remember what we would have done, Mr. Sayed, is in every school, we'd have reduced the posts, right? I'm saying every school, but some schools it didn't apply to, but I'm just in general. So let's say we reduced the post by 3 out of 50. Now they've got 47 teachers. That's an equation the school principal would have known about at the end of last year, which is normal in a school system to know about that. Then you make a plan based as the principal with what you actually have. You have so many classrooms, you have so many teachers, you have so many learners, you have so many subjects. And then you've got a timetable that into a system where you can actually say, well, okay, that's how I need to cut the cake. And they do that. Mr. Mayor and his team assist our schools to do that. So there shouldn't be a school, even with the cuts, that is sitting in a situation where they haven't actually timetabled things. Now, clearly, there are other issues. For example, if you make the classrooms less and you got the same amount of learners, or you took in more learners, and that means your classroom size actually increases. But I wanted to just make the point that there are mechanisms in the department to be able to make sure that the timetabling thing can actually be done. Because we had spoken about that towards the end of last year. Mr. Mayor was basically put in charge of making sure that these things actually that there were no problems in relation to that. Mr. Mayor, we can also just talk about Solomon Mashlangu. There was a question about that. And then I also know, as far as the question that came about the unplaced, when does the learner get placed? Well, we offer them places. Remember, we just had what's called a 10th day snap, where, as Mr. Mayor explained in one of the answers he previously gave, that some learners don't turn up. So then that provides place. Ultimately, we can only offer that place to a parent. We can't place the child. We offer the place, the parent places and says, yes, I agree. We'll actually take that place. And then, Mr. Mayor, if you can maybe just also talk about there were questions on school safety and the system around safe schools. I know there's a reporting system. I know that data is actually available. So maybe you can just talk about those, but that would just be my.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just to reinforce the HOD's message about the learner transport for learners that have been placed very far from home. We need to understand if there are examples that the member has, to please send it through to us so that we can investigate in those particular instances and see, why there was a place offered much further away from where the child lives. And we'll definitely follow up on that. Then, in terms of youth programs, and the member mentioned Mannenberg, I'm pleased to say that on the 27th of this month, we've got a focused youth sport intervention in the Hanover Park area. Ourselves, the Western Cape Education Department, as well as the Department of Cultural Affairs and Sport, will be having sport activity over 3 days for learners within that particular community to play football against each other. And there will be a finals and all of that to provide an opportunity for learners to give expression to their talents outside of the classroom. We also have at a number of our schools, we have the DCAS program for after school sport, where coaches have been employed by the Department of Cultural Affairs and Sport to work with learners after normal school hours to get them skilled up for football, for rugby, for netball and table tennis, etc. It's a program we are working very closely with the Department of Cultural Affairs and Sports. Members will also be aware that there's an agreement that has been signed at national level between the Department of Education and the Department of Sports and Culture nationally, between the two ministers. And we have actioned that already, and we're working towards a school sport policy, which we hope to have by June of this year. And so this first intervention in Hanover Park is one of the attempts where we're working together and see how that works, and we'll take lessons from it and look at replicating at various areas. We are very keen on having our learners participate in sport. We've had a number of sports days already. All our districts are having athletics competitions as we speak. Schools are out participating in athletics, and we're hoping, that when the finals come around, we'll be able to be part of those particular programs as well. So there's a number of sports programs prioritizing youth within particularly hard to teach, difficult communities, as well as drug programs. And from the Safe School side, we have the search and seizure program, where a school can request that we search learners who are found with drugs. We have a program of where we try to work with those learners, either as a way away from it. If it's dealing, of course, it's something different. That would follow a normal disciplinary process. But we do have programs in place to address that. In terms of safety plans for schools, yes, a school must have a safety plan, but more importantly, a school must have a school safety committee first. So it's a subcommittee of the governing body of the school. That committee has as a member on it the local SAPS police station as well. So SAPS has to provide a member to be on that particular school's safety committee. And so the teachers, the parents, and the learners at the high school would meet around safety concerns within their school. They work on a joint safety plan. Every school has a safety plan in the province. The reason why we can say that is we've implemented the safety and security resilience scorecard for our schools. And with the Department of Oversight, I lost their new name, the old police safety, community safety department, they developed a system, POXIS. They developed a system for us, the safety and security resilience scorecard. A school has to complete that, and it gets populated onto provincial kind of table. So we can identify from that schools that are identified as red high-risk schools. So if you remember a few years ago, there was a resurgence of violence in the Lavender Hill area. And that is where the need came from. So when Lavender Hill High School let us know there's a gang fight in the area, and the school next door, Prince George Primary, let us know that there's activity, and Leelwood and another school in Lavana in that area, we could then deploy resources via the TMC of the city, with SAPS, to send in teams into that area. So that's the approach we're following with the safety resilience scorecard. We want to make it an online system and a live system, so that as incidents occur, a principal can go into the system and update it and say, there's just been a major shooting in our area. The TMC of the City of Cape Town, where SAPS is also present, can then deploy resources immediately to areas where there's highest risk as being identified by principals on the ground. So, but from a safety plan, yes, our schools have one, and it's measured by that safety and security resilience scorecard. And it is in the interest of the school to complete it, because otherwise you don't get identified as being a high-risk school. You're not going to be considered for school holiday security. You're not going to be involved in the drug campaigns, the positive behavior campaigns, if you do not complete those particular matters or that particular plan. Then in terms of Blue Ridge, it is a new school. We have met with the community on 2 occasions already. There are meetings planned going forward with the community in the area of Blue Ridge Primary School. The primary school is partially opened. It is not fully open because there's still some classrooms that needs to be completed. The high school has already started work as well. And the intention is that on 1st of January 2026, the high school will also open, and that will then also create more possibility for space in that particular community as well. I think that covered the questions it was. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I'm going to hand over to member Christians. And are there any other members of the committee who I see member Kasim's hand as well. So member Christians, then member Kasim, and then if there are any other members of the committee who wish to ask, that we'll do with this route.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the presentation of the National Senior Certificate. Chair, if I look at, and I'm just going to a couple of pages, if I look at this, students that wrote a 62,863, that's page 7. So if you look at page 8, 64,360 registered. So there's about 1,497 that dropped out that did not write. Concern to me. And if you look at page 10, then you see quintile 1. So only got 4,298 candidates who wrote, 5,964 quintile 2. And if you look at the quintile 5 and quintile 4, that number is 24,000, 13,000. So there, I don't know, is there a lot of, is there quintile 1, 2, is there a lot of dropouts there? Why is that number so low, 4,200 and 5,900? And then, Chair, if we look at page 11 and page 12, and you look at the no fee charging schools, and you look at all the districts here, bachelor's pass rate in your no fee charging schools is 28%, 36%, you can go on. And if you go to the fee charging schools, it's 67, 77, and you can go on. Major concern, because it seems that the children in the poorer areas is not achieving as well as the children in the wealthy areas. So that is a major concern. And then if you look at, and also there's a page of male and females. Is that the ratio of the population in those areas? Because the females is much higher than the males, 36,000 and somewhat females and 28,000 somewhat males. So is there a dropout because of other, if the department can just say that? And then here at the end, I think it's page where we have those who did not succeed, page 10. If you look at page 10, those who did not, no, I've got that already. It's the other figure, page 20, where we look at those who did not achieve National Senior Certificate, 807 quintile 1, 1,020 quintile 2, and then you go to the others, quintile 5 is 1,009. But if you look at the figures, and that is why I gave those figures, because this figures here is very misleading, because you'll say only 807 of quintile 1 did not achieve. But if you look at the numbers that they gave, it's out of 4,298. If you look at quintile 5, 1,944, it's out of 24,000. So if you break that up to percentages, you'll actually get the picture what's happening here. So it's concerns that I'm raising to say that our schools in our poor areas are still underperforming, and there needs something to be done. I heard the good stories in Kailicha and that, but there's still a big discrepancy when it comes to the numbers. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Member Christians. I think, at the same time, I think you asked a very difficult question there, why girls are more clever than boys. But we'll go on to Member Kasim in the meantime, and we can discuss our other little problem later on. Member Kasim.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, I just have my last 3 questions. On slide 20, with regards to the 1,443 learners who registered for the NST examination, but then did not write it, what was the cause of this? If the department has a report on this, and then did they suddenly drop out, or was some sick, or what was the situation? And what did the department do to intervene or to follow up on why those matriculants dropped out? And then my second question is, how far is the department in terms of the bullying and the racism investigation at the Delft Primary School that had parents and community members protesting? And then also, what programs are in place at the school when it comes to preventing racism and bullying at that specific schools and other schools who have similar cases? Then my last question, Chairperson, is with regards to infrastructure. I want to touch on the school infrastructure, and while some of the members have already indicated the lack of classes in schools, let me also point out that many learners and teachers across the province are working in dangerous conditions across the province because of the education department taking its own time to respond to pleas of intervention. Let me make an example of one school in Mitchell's Plain, Imperial Primary School, who in 2022 already lodged a complaint of a broken and unsafe balcony. Now, while we know that, Chairperson, that the school balcony should be supported with a balcony support structure. This specific balcony at the primary school, which has over 200 grade 7 students running up and down on an old, cracked, unmaintained balcony on a daily basis, currently have a few very thin, bent and broken metal poles currently supporting the structure. Now, the department also promised to come back when there was no children occupying the space. However, Chairperson, the school holiday has already passed and the department did not show up, with parents now fearing for the kids' lives as they are forced to attend classes on a balcony that could collapse anytime, Chairperson. Now, my question is, now this is not the first, or rather, Chairperson, this is not the first time as well that the department has received complaints with regards to damaged balconies or class structures, and therefore I want to know how serious is the department about prioritizing such cases when you receive a complaint from the school, or is the minister in this department first waiting to show up with the media when the balcony of Imperial Primary School, for example, collapsed at the school? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thanks, Member Kasim. I'll now hand over to Mr. Walters and to Minister.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Maybe just to say on the questions about the quintals. Remember, 75% of our learners are in quintile 4 and 5. So the results are obviously going to peak in 4 and 5, which got more people there. It's not to minimize the point you've made, because obviously in poorer areas there are issues, and so clearly we need to do that. But I just wanted to make the point that it isn't even. It's not 20%, 20%, 20%, 20%. It isn't even. So you see that bulge that does potentially happen. I am going to ask Mr. Lauriston to address all the questions in relation to the matric performance. Mr. Lauriston, can please do that? And then I am going to ask Mr. Meyer if you could please answer a question about Taft Primary, and Mr. Abrams, if you can answer the question, I think broadly about infrastructure. If we can go in that order, Mr. Lauriston first, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, SG. Member questions, the 64,380. That is the lowest percentage of dropouts that we had. It's 2.3%, with 1,400 learners, of which 2,215 are progress learners. Just to give you the profile of these learners, but we do try to track them, and we do try to negotiate them, because annually there is the dropout that we find in this grade. However, we do try to maintain and promote to say that every learner who reaches grade 12 must sit for the examination, and that's why we also present it in that ratio, to show that we have we zoom into those areas to make sure that the districts and the schools account for the learners that are no longer within their system. So we do try to keep a track of that, and I do think from 2020 to now it was about the preparation of the learners, and I think we stabilized that now, and I think we should focus to get it below 2 and then 0. Our ultimate is 0, because that is what we're striving for. I think the last time we had a point below 2 was around about 2014. So we will definitely work towards that. Then with regards to the quintile 1s and 3s, I just want to give you the perspective of the quintile 1s and 3s, and that's why we also analyze in the way so that you can understand that we try to zoom into the areas where it is needed. I specifically made in the presentation the comment about whether language across the curriculum, building a vocabulary, because those are the diagnostic reports that constantly come through to say learners cannot answer the questions like this. And we do know that we have a challenge where learners do not speak the way that they have to write. So that's a big skill that we have to promote within our preparation for the matric examination. But just to say to you, the quintile 1s to 3s in 2000 had a pass rate of 53% in 2009. I didn't include that, but I can give you the data from 2008 as well, because it just makes sense of to see how far we actually came with this. And then in 2014, we had a 69% pass rate. Then in 2019, we went up to 73, and then we had COVID in between. We at 80% and then 82%. And currently you find that the difference between the top and the bottom is 5.0%, while it was quite large before that between where the disparities, and that's what we are driving towards, to see how best we can improve the system and not the grade, as I've indicated, because the outcome of this depends on the entire system, not on grade 12. And I think that is one of the strive that we have towards, to see, are we actually utilizing our resources correctly and in the correct manner. The male females, yes, that is the numbers that is there, and as indicated, the girl learner is having a better quality of pass than the boy learner, and we will definitely have to zoom into, and it's a collaborative effort between Mr. Meyer and myself, to see, are we just going to focus on content, or actually going to focus on content and perceptions of the learners of what they can achieve within the system. And I think that more, because I think there was a long intervention for girl learners and we left the boy learners to their own devices. And I think we will have to bring that back in. And I think one of the biggest things that we will have to do is to introduce sports and other positive outlets in this regard to the system that we have there. Yeah, I think that answered the question.
Thank you, Chairperson. In terms of the bullying and racism issue at Leiden, the bullying and racism issue at Leiden that occurred at Leiden High School, 2 learners have been suspended already, Chairperson. The governing body is meeting tonight to decide on the disciplinary hearing when that is going to happen. So they have been suspended so far. The delay, Member Kasim, in the process was the CCTV footage that needed to be downloaded, viewed by the governing body in order to make a decision, as evidence towards the disciplinary process. But it is underway. The governing body will decide tonight on dates and times of meetings with the learners, the affected learners, sorry, and their representatives. And so there will be an outcome or a request to the HOD, as per the normal process around a disciplinary process, whether they're requesting further suspension or expulsion of the 2 learners, but that will come through to the HOD for a final decision. Thanks. That's it.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate the question from the member on the school infrastructure. We will follow up on the feedback on Imperial Primary, the assertion that the balcony matter would have needed to be attended to. We'll check on the detail around that. The pivotal question, though, was how serious are we? We're very serious, Chair. Sometimes the data helps. We have been stretched, and this is obviously the statistics, not by the Western Cape Department. This is nationally confirmed, the fastest growing province in the country, with the oldest school estate in the country, subject to the climatic conditions in our rural and urban context that would impact us, probably on a par, if not to a great extent, at other provinces, and the rapid urbanization. What I mean to say when I put that in context is that our efforts to be responsive to the wide range of needs, whether it's expanding with more classrooms or whether it's dealing with floods and roofs blowing off, the response times in places like Cape Winelands, our response times to the school in Mitchell's Plain or the classroom who blew away in Nomzamo, to put that in context, our responsiveness were in days and weeks as opposed to, dragging our heels on that one. And so I think the suggestion is, could we be more transparent around, what are we doing exactly to show how serious we are in mobilizing additional funding? I think we've now established that the money doesn't quite follow the child timelessly. We have, as a first in the country, pursued alternative finance. And as we expand the system, we're very cognizant that 50% of our school estate was built during the time of apartheid, not meeting norms and standards. And we heard the names of schools that are on the list. And it's now a function of budget certainty and some predictability around our supply chain, which obviously has been well known in the construction sector is a very volatile space. Our efforts are measured by our outcomes, and I think the productivity with the amount of schools, we heard 10 today. It's probably worth measuring whether we could do more than the 10 new schools per year, given the relative productivity in the country around 1 or 2. So I have to speak quite clearly about how serious we are taking the matter of well-being and safety of all who use our schools, whether it is our learners or our teachers, or anybody within the precinct. Very happy to share our pipeline of projects that includes obviously emergency and disaster maintenance, but certainly the building of new schools that will replace the ones that do not meet norms and standards. Thank you.
Thank you. I think thanks for those questions. I think from a committee's perspective, I think we've been through our questions. I also recognize we're getting to the end of the day, and I will now allow 3 persons to pose questions related to the topic that Standing Committee has been dealing with today, dealing with admission, school readiness, and the matric results. And naturally, department can then deal with that, whether they wish to deal with those questions. So I think if we could then get 3 hands there.
Yeah. Sorry, Chairperson, just on a point of order in terms of our rules, standing committees are not public hearings. They are meetings of the committee. We do have opportunities for public involvement during public participation processes. And I've just checked the parliamentary program. On the 12th of March, there is a public engagement on the Western Cape Appropriation Bill for 2025. In terms of Standing Rule 9, these meetings are open to members only because it is an extension of the House, and only by invitation of the Speaker can members be given an opportunity to engage the committee. What I would propose, Chairperson, is that you release the Minister and the SG and the department, and they can engage with members of the public outside whilst we discuss the resolutions, because I understand there is a help desk set up as well. But in terms of Rule 9, Rule 72, and Rule 75, there are very strict parameters in terms of our rules of when these meetings are open to the public for public participation. And when that does happen as well, there is a process for that involvement to happen as well.
Thank you, Chief Whip. I think based on that advice that you've given me, I think we then want to thank the Minister.
On a point of order, Honourable Chair. Geagbare voorsitter, ons was genooi. Die publiek kan nie genooi word hiernatoe en nie 'n vraag het om te vra nie. Mitchell Splein het vandag vir my hier gestuur met 'n vraag vir die government. So Mitchell Splein wil vandag 'n antwoord hê en ek demand dat die minister van Mitchell Splein 'n antwoord gee. Kan ek van hierdie geleentheid gebruik maak om 'n vraag te vra namens die mense van Mitchell Splein? Ek demand dit, asseblief, voorsitter.
Chair, can I come in, Chair? Chair, I think the chief whip of the Democratic Alliance is totally out of order, Chair. We've had a practice in this particular committee over the years where beyond budget vote discussions, beyond annual reports, members of the public have been allowed to infuse our discussions, especially for us to listen to what members of the public are saying, because that informs our oversight. The rules do not say that they cannot ask questions. If the chairperson is a prerogative of the chair, the chairperson, you have ruled, you have said members of the public can ask particular questions. Now we are hearing a different thing. In fact, this sentiment was expressed last week. On his social media, he already said to somebody that this is not going to be allowed to happen. So this is all part and parcel. I wanted to go on record, and I'm glad EWN are here still. Must go on record that the DA in this province is hell-bent on protecting the executive in a blind manner as possible against the public of the Western Cape. Thank you very much. And if this is going to continue, I'm walking out as a representative of the ANC. Thank you very much.
And on that basis, I would like to ask my question.
Chairperson, I would like to raise a point of order. This meeting cannot be disrupted by anyone, any member of the public or any member of this committee. What we saw there of points of orders being called, clapping, shouting, screaming in the middle of a committee meeting, which is unacceptable. The rules are very clear on that, Member Sayed.
Yeah.
So now I'm being harassed as a speaker, which is unacceptable. And I would like to point out, I represent the public as a public representative. I'm being disrupted. I'm being harassed. I'm being harassed while I'm speaking. So, Chair, but what I wanted to say, the point is that the chief whip of the DA raised the point of order that it's important that this entire matter is dealt with in terms of the rule. Right? I'm busy speaking and you don't have the right to speak while I'm speaking. And you must work through the chair. Chair, so clearly I'm being harassed here while I'm busy speaking. I'm not getting the respect that I'm entitled to as a member of this committee. It's very clear from also the stage managed reaction that we just had that this is being politicized when we as committee members are actually interested in interrogating the matter in front of us. I'm still being harassed while I'm speaking. Chairperson, I just want to point out, if we're going to have a precedent of people getting invited who are not the public, we represent the public. We as the elected representatives, you are individuals. You are individuals that are coming to a meeting here. If you think that you can come to committee meetings and disrupt it with the assistance of disruptive political parties, then Chair, I suggest that you make a ruling. Then you make a ruling.
On the point of order.
If this meeting is getting disrupted, you are well within your rights to act on it. So I just thought that needed to be said as well.
I wish to thank the
Chair, on the point of order,
and the
Chair.
department for the presentation that they've done. I think it has been
No,
an
on the
extremely
point of
valuable
order,
presentation.
You have no right to call
And
people disruptive here, to call members of this
Therefore,
committee
release you
disruptive,
Thank
because
you
we
very
are not
much for those.
disrupting.
The committee will then stay on and conclude the
Chair.
proceedings of the meeting. Thank you.
Chair, you're allowing yourself to be undermined. You've ruled that members are allowed to ask questions.
Honorable Chair, hy het gepraat van hy represent die public. Die public het mos vir hom hier gesit. Nou die public vra vir antwoorde vandag. Die public het vir hom hier gesit. So die public wil weet wat gaan aan by die skole.
The meeting is adjourned.
Ja, dis wat julle DA members doen. Julle maak die vote stil. Julle is available wanneer daar gewout word, dan is julle in Mitchellsplein. Maar wanneer Mitchellsplein 'n vraag het om te vra, dan maak julle ons stil. Dan maak julle ons stil. Shame on you. Shame on the Democratic Alliance. Shame on you. Shame on you.